Side 1, RC 46114, Objective Bajor, by John Peel. Copyright 1996 by Paramount Pictures. Read by James D. Lotell. This book contains 278 pages on 7 sides. If you would like to skip over any remaining announcements or introductory material, place your cassette player in fast forward until a beep is heard. Stop at that point to hear the beginning of the book. Library of Congress annotation. The Hive, a huge starship housing billions of insect-like aliens, is heading for the planet Bajor for fuel and raw material. Within a week, the Bajorans will face annihilation unless Captain Sisko and the crew of Deep Space Nine find a way to stop the powerful invaders. A Star Trek Deep Space Nine novel, 1996. From the book jacket. Captain Sisko must protect a planet from total destruction. The Hive came from another galaxy. Billions of alien beings living inside a vast biological starship. They have already destroyed one planet, converting it into raw material and fuel for their endless voyage through the cosmos. Now the Hive is heading for Bajor, and they have given the planet's inhabitants an ominous warning. Evacuate in 3 days, or die along with their world. The Bajorans would rather die than abandon their sacred home, but their hastily assembled military fleet does not stand a chance against the awesome power of the Hive, unless Captain Sisko can penetrate the Hive's defenses and discover their most closely guarded secret. All of Bajor faces extinction. This book is in memory of Harold F. Taylor, now on the greatest trek of all. Chapter 1. Target coming in range now, Captain. Captain Benjamin Sisko nodded. Thank you, Major. He leaned forward in the command chair of the USS Defiant and stared intently at the view screen. All weapons to full power. Raise shields. All weapons powered. Kira Nerys glanced up from her panel to Sisko's left. There was a gleam of excitement in her eyes, and the more than fleeting suggestion of a smile on her lips. Ready on your command. Sisko could understand her feelings perfectly. It had been more than a month since any of them had been off Deep Space Nine at all, and it felt really good to be back in space and back in action. Though commanding DS-9 was hardly a simple desk job, it was good to spread one's wings and head out among the stars again. Hold steady. Shields at full, Captain, Chief O'Brien reported from his panel. Thank you, Chief. Sisko could feel the thrill of the hunt now. He watched the forward image intently, waiting for the first glimpse of the... There she is, Captain, Jadzia Dax said. She was seated at navigation, between Sisko and the screen. Her superior eyesight had caught the briefest flicker of movement that he now belatedly noticed. It's a Calderisi raider, all right, added Odo from his station. Classic configuration, and they've powered up their weapons, too. The shapeshifter was the only one who didn't look eager for this confrontation. That was mostly because he still hadn't mastered the art of shaping his somewhat rudimentary features into semblances of human emotions. They can outrun most ships in this quadrant, Sisko murmured, but they can't beat this one. Open a hailing frequency, he called out. Open, Dax responded. This is Captain Benjamin Sisko of the Federation starship Defiant, to Calderisi Raider, he said slowly and clearly. You are ordered to stand down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. We have reason to believe that you are running illicit weapons to the Maquis. He gestured to Dax for her to terminate the transmission. Now, he said, let's see what their reply is, shall we? He hunched forward in his command chair, feeling the tension building within him. They've changed course, Odo announced grimly. They are now heading directly for us. He shook his head. Foolish, and typically humanoid. They are also opening fire. The screen dimmed automatically as twin phaser bolts lanced out from the dart-shaped ship that skimmed toward them. The Defiant trembled slightly as the bolts impacted on the ship's deflectors. "I think we can take that as a no," Kira commented. "No damage to shields," O'Brien called. Sisko raised an eyebrow. He hadn't really expected the Calderisi to surrender. They were a volatile species at the best of times, and he had been certain that they were indeed the gunrunners he was after. Still, he hadn't expected them to do anything as foolish as trying to attack the Defiant. "Even so, I think we had better defend ourselves, Chief." He spun to face Major Kira. "Fire a warning shot across their bow." "Across?" Kira sounded disappointed. "Across," he repeated with a slight smile. "For the first one, at any rate. And fire!" Kira obeyed. The Defiant shuddered slightly as the phasers lanced out across the void at the twisting raider. "Open a channel," Sisko ordered Dax, "and stay as close to them as you can manage." When Dax nodded, he called aloud, "Sisko to Calderisi raider. I repeat, stand down, or we shall be forced to disable you. I cannot be certain that this will not result in some loss of life to you." Another twin blast of phasers shot from the raider, again dissipating harmlessly against the shields. Grim, Sisko turned to his Bajoran first officer. "All right, Major. Target their engine nacelles and take them out." "Aye, sir," Kira replied with a great deal of satisfaction. Her hands flew over the phaser controls. "Captain," O'Brien called out suddenly, "I'm registering a drop in shield strength." He sounded harried and puzzled. "They're down to 95% and dropping." "What?" Sisko spun to face him. "What's causing it, Chief?" O'Brien glared down at the panels. "Outside interference," he said. "There's some kind of jamming signal coming from the raider. It's causing interference in the generator wave somehow. I've never seen anything like it. Shields are now down to 80%. Sisko turned back to Kira. "Now would be a good time to fire," he said gently. "I'd agree with you, Captain," Kira agreed, frustration evident in her voice. "But whatever's affecting the shields is affecting the targeting sensors, too. I just can't get a lock on a confirmed target. Plus," she added angrily, "power levels on the phasers are dropping. We soon won't be able to fire them at all." "Best guess, then," he ordered, scowling. "Any damage you can do to stop this attack." He spun back to O'Brien. "Any idea yet what's causing this, Chief?" "None," the engineer answered, irritated with the reply. "As Major Kira says, all our sensors are being affected, too, so I can't get a straight reading on this thing. Off the top of my head, I'd say it was some sort of modified delta emitter array, but how they could power one from a craft that small beats me. I could do with a bit of time to study it, say a couple of weeks." He gave a mild grin. "Not funny, Chief," Sisko objected. "Status?" Embarrassed, O'Brien checked his panel. "Shields down to 60% and falling." "They're coming about," Odo announced. "I'd guess they aim to attack us now. It's difficult to read my instruments, but it looks like they're preparing to fire again." As Sisko watched the view screen, he saw the dart-shaped raider heading for them. Twin phaser beams lanced out, slashing into the Defiant. The ship shuddered as the inertial dampers struggled to keep her steady. The lights in the cabin dimmed, flickered, and then settled down to about half their former level. "That's it," O'Brien announced. "The shields are down completely. The power interference is spiraling around inside the systems now. We've lost the phasers," Kira reported grimly. "I'm firing a photon torpedo." She glanced up and managed a tight smile. "Best guess, so you'd better hope I'm feeling lucky today." Sisko nodded. There were very few options left to them. Whatever weapon the Calderisi were using, it was wreaking havoc with his ship. Another run like the last one would destroy them. He watched as the ship on the screen began to turn. Then the picture started to break up as the power levels continued to fall. "Damn," he muttered. If he was going to die, he would prefer to stare his fate in the face as he did so. There was the flash of a photon torpedo ejection, and the ship shook with the strain. a strain that they wouldn't normally have even felt, thanks to the dampers. Now it seemed as if the Defiant was falling apart about their ears. Then there was a bright flash on what was left of the picture screen, the torpedo detonation. But had Kira hit the target? For several seconds, everyone on the bridge stared at the screen, holding their breath. Nothing came into sight. Finally, Odo called out, "I'm registering debris ahead. The raider was completely destroyed." "Well done," Sisko said, sighing with relief. "Very nice shooting." "Thank you," Kira said with a smile. From where he'd been sitting watching the others, Julian Bashir spoke up. "Remind me not to play darts with you today, Major. Even blindfolded, I think you'd beat me." The only one of the crew not smiling was O'Brien. With a scowl, he said, "I just wish we hadn't been forced to destroy their ship." He shook his head. "I'd have loved to get a good long look at that weapon of theirs." "We all would, Chief," Sisko agreed. "But under the circumstances, I think we did well just to survive. How are the systems now that the raider is gone?" "Recovering slightly," O'Brien answered, "but not by much. We're going to be limping back to DS9, Captain." Sisko nodded. "I'm in no hurry right now. How long will it take to get the Defiant back up to par when we do reach home?" O'Brien shook his head. "It depends on how many systems were damaged, and by how much," he replied. "I can't get consistent readings here. It could be days or even weeks, if we've got the spares, and if there aren't too many repairs on the station to keep my crew busy." "I understand." Sisko turned back to Dax. "Set course for home. Best speed." He managed a small smile. "If you could manage a rough estimate of how long it'll take us, I'd appreciate it." "As soon as I can, Benjamin." Dax bent to her task. Sisko saw that her hands, instead of flying across her board as they normally did, lingered and repeated tasks several times. Finally, she looked up. "Course laid in and executed." She shook her head. "It's really slow, I'm afraid. It's going to take us at least 6 hours to get back." "Understood. Can you patch through a channel back to DS9? We'd better let them know we'll be late for dinner." "I'll try my best." She bent back to her board again. A moment or two later, she said, "I've got a weak audio link, Benjamin. It's all I can raise." "I'm glad for even that," Sisko told her. "Sisko to Ops. Can you read me?" "Ops here," came a faint, crackling voice. "Your signal is very faint, Captain. Are you all right?" "Not exactly, Mr. Soika," Sisko replied. "We've destroyed the Calderisi raider, but sustained damage. We should be home in about 6 hours." "Understood." Lieutenant Soika's weak voice came back. "Do you need assistance? I could have a runabout out to you pretty quickly." "Thank you, no," Sisko said ruefully. "We'll just head back under our own steam, licking our wounds. Sisko out." He cut the link. Gazing at the screen, he sighed. The picture was still rather fuzzy, symptomatic of the ship's damage. Still, at least they had survived, and stopped the weaponry shipment. Whatever new weapon the Calderisi had, it would be up to Starfleet now to try and track it down and neutralize it. He'd have O'Brien transmit a full report when they reached home. Then the chief was going to be very busy getting the Defiant back into order. Sisko could only hope that until it was fixed, there wouldn't be a need for it. And he knew how weak his chances were that this would be so. On DS9, crises were the order of the day. Chapter 2. "You have betrayed us all and everything that we believe in." Even though he had been more than half expecting this accusation, Torque winced at the words that Harl spat out. There was a pain in his thorax as he faced his oldest and once dearest friend. "Harl, it is not like that. Believe me, I have no intention—" "It does not matter what you mean now," Harl retorted, his anger and disappointment clear on his face. "They have sucked you in. In a short while you will be just like them. And I thought you believed in what we talked about." He gave a snort of disgust. "I should have known better." "Harl, enough." As always, Sana's voice was quiet and yet piercing. Despite his mood, Harl subsided. When Sana wanted something, she inevitably got her way, and without undue effort. "You are not being fair to Tork, and in your hearts you must know this. You have not given him a chance to explain." Her lips twitched mischievously. "And isn't that your main complaint against the hive masters, that they will not listen?" She gestured toward Tork. "Now, here is an apprentice hive master, and you will not allow him to speak. Is that fair?" "He's not an apprentice hive master," Harl replied sulkily, but somewhat chastened. "He's our ex-friend, who's gone over to the side of the enemy." "Please," begged Tork, "listen to me. Harl, I have not betrayed you. You know very well that my determination was what led me to become a hive master. I did not seek the position. It was thrust upon me." "Of course it was," sneered Harl, his nostrils dilating rapidly, showing his disgust. "But why? Was it because such elevated positions are hereditary in your lineage?" He snorted again. "Or because the other hive masters are trying to buy your silence by offering you the post, and expecting you to silence the rest of the student critics as payment? Have they asked that of you yet, or are they waiting until you discover that you can no longer live without all the privileges of the exalted position of hive master?" Tork knew that it was mostly Harl's anger speaking, but he couldn't help being hurt and irritated by his old friend. "Harl," he said, trying to stay reasonable, "you know me. You know my commitment to the truth. Surely you must see that I am not going to abandon all that I believe in, simply because I have been appointed a hive master." "All I see," Harl snapped back, "is that badge on your carapace." He gestured at the symbol of the hive that Tork now wore. "The badge that we all agreed stands for repression of thought and maintenance of the status quo. How could you?" Tork's patience was wearing thin now. "Because I believe that there are some hive masters who are not against us," he replied. "Because I think that it is not the office that is wrong, but some who hold the position. Because I think that working from within I can effect changes. Because if the public sees even just one hive master who will listen instead of simply giving orders, then change is possible. Because I think that in this thing I am right, and you are being a thick-skulled idiot." Harl stabbed out one long bony finger, quivering with anger. "Perhaps, just perhaps, you believe that now," he snarled. "But it will not last. Remember your precious texts. Power is its own reward and curse." He grimaced. "Or have you already forgotten all of your studies?" "I have forgotten nothing," Tork answered, striving to keep his temper. "But you, it appears, have forgotten one thing. Our friendship." "Friendship?" Harl deliberately turned his carapace on Tork. "You have already murdered our friendship. The Tork I once thought I knew and respected is dead. All that is left is a hive master." He spat the last word and then stormed from the meeting room. The door hissed shut behind him. Sana placed a hand on Tork's shoulder. "Well," she said gently, "that went better than I expected it to." His heart lifted slightly at her touch, as they always did, but it could not ease the pain he felt. "He would not listen," Tork said bitterly. "He did not try and understand." Laughing, Sana shook her head. "Harl? Tork, now who is having unreasonable expectations. You know what he is like. Anger consumes him too often." She shook her shapely head. "But it will not last. The flame that burns brightest dies fastest," she quoted. "His anger will be gone shortly, and he will begin to think again." "I hope so." Tork gave a long sigh. "I know it was foolish of me to expect otherwise, but I had hoped—" "Yes," Sana said gently, "and that is where you are so different from Harl. You hope. You work hard and strive for reason and change. Harl simply wants to sweep away the old and bring in the new. And this is not possible. Your way is the better way." It warmed his thorax to hear her speak so well of him. "Then you approve of my acceptance?" he asked eagerly. Sana smiled at him. "I have always approved of you, Tork," she replied. "You are a calm, reasoning, and caring individual." She touched his carapace again, and Tork felt a thrill of mingled love and lust pass through him. "And you are my hope." It took a great deal of self-control for Tork to quash the burning feelings within him. Though he had undergone his determination and was now officially an adult, Sana had not. If he made his feelings for her known, it would not only be immoral, but illegal. Perhaps as a hive-master, Tork would be immune to such charges as immorality, but he simply could not chance it. It wasn't just the fear of being caught. He knew that Sana would say nothing, even if he were to make unwelcomed and illicit advances to her, but that he could not use his office as a shield for his crimes. After all, wasn't that one of the things that had always most disgusted him about the hive-masters? One rule for the hive and one for the masters. He had to be better than that, not only for the sake of his own soul, but also as an example to everyone, especially Sana. She looked at him with her wise eyes, and he was pierced by an arrow of certainty. She knew what he had been thinking. "I am sorry, Tork," she told him, removing her hand. "I should not have done that. It was wrong of me to test you in that way." "You—" he started to say, to tell her she had done nothing wrong. She didn't allow him to finish. "I was deliberately tempting you," she said, smiling slightly. "I should have known that you would not succumb." "I wanted to," he replied. As an adult, he was morally bound never to approach a single female child. Despite the fact that she was from the same hatching year as himself, Sana had not undergone determination herself, and was thus still technically a child. "But you did not," she said fondly. "Whatever Harl thinks, you have proven that your sense of honor remains untouched. And as a child," she added ironically, "I am allowed to say what you cannot at present. I love you, Tork, and want to be one with you." She held up a hand. "Do not say anything. Yet." Tork understood once again how much wisdom she possessed. Sana always knew exactly how far to go. She had effectively promised herself to him, without compromising his morals. With her love and his new position, he had almost everything he had ever desired from life. "Do you have any idea when your determination will be?" he asked her. Of course, it was supposed to be a surprise. His certainly had been. But there were always ways that the news could get around. "Within the next few cycles," she replied. "And I also suspect what the outcome will be." Seeing his amazement, she laughed. "Do not be so naive, Tork. Some determinations are quite obvious. Most, in fact." "Mine was not," he answered. "Perhaps." Sana's lips twitched again. "But it is not exactly unexpected. I believe you will make an exemplary hive-master, perhaps the first such in several centuries." Her support and love made his thorax warm again. Tork fought down his emotions, striving to be what she expected of him. "And what do you believe your determination will make you?" he asked. "An astronomer." If she had told him that she was expecting to become a sex provider, she couldn't have shocked him more. "An astronomer?" he gasped weakly. You can't be serious." "Why not?" Sana cocked her head to one side and regarded him evenly. "It's an unpleasant job, agreed, but a necessary one, especially now." "But you—" Tork struggled weakly with his prejudices. "Sana, how could you?" "It is because I can that I expect to become one," Sana answered. "If this disgusts and repels you, I am truly sorry." She smiled ruefully. "That is one reason, beyond the impropriety, that I did not wish you to declare your love for me. If you no longer wish to associate with me, I will understand. It might be poor for your public image." "My image be damned," he snapped back, still struggling to accept the idea. "And my feelings for you have not changed." "Of course they have," Sana said simply. "I understand." "Well, I do not," Tork told her, bluntly and with candor. "I do not understand how you could wish to be an astronomer." He almost choked on the word. "But—" He took a deep breath. "If that is what you wish to be, then I will do all I can to support your decision. I may not understand it, but I do not care about that. I will try to understand." He drew on every ounce of courage he had and tried to reinforce his hearts. "Show me." Sana stared at him in something like alarm. "Tork, there is no need." "There is a need," he said almost roughly. "If this is to be your chosen pathway, then I will be forced to share it with you. I must understand it. Show me." She bowed her head slightly. "It is not wise," she replied. "Love is not always wise," he told her. "So be it." Sana raised her head, and he could see the love in her eyes. Ah, if not for the boundary that separated them, what passions they could share this night. "Very well," she agreed. "Come with me." She led him through the web of the student quarter. Tork followed, trying to steel himself for the ordeal that was ahead. He was scared. There was no point in denying that, either to himself or to Sana. But he had to do this, for both of their sakes. They left the more traveled byways, and Tork knew they were coming close to the wall of the hive. Their destination was an almost empty room. The walls, as always, were metal, but these had no decorations or furniture. The only thing in the room with them was a small control panel. As she locked the door behind them to prevent accidental intrusion of the unprepared, Sana turned to Tork. "I love you," she told him. "You do not need to do this for me. I will understand and respect you without this." "I know that you will," he agreed. "But I do this for us, and I will not respect myself if I do not share it with you." Sana sighed and bowed her head in acceptance. "Very well," she agreed. She crossed to the control panel, her hands hovering uncertainly above it. "Try hard to endure this, my love." He didn't dare speak. Instead, he simply gave a single curt nod. Her fingers danced over the controls. The wall in front of them both began to iris open. Panels slid back into their recesses with a hiss. As they moved, the lights within the room died down, and the stars became visible. Thousands, perhaps millions of stars littered across the whole vast space in front of Tork. Stars that burned with beautiful, entrancing intensity. Stars that went on without end to the openness of space. Tork felt the vast emptiness beyond the fragile, transparent shielding, reaching out from the stars and into the core of his being. The openness pierced his soul. The immensity of it all overwhelmed him. Striving to escape the vast nothingness, he shrieked, then curled reflexively into a fetal ball, his carapace sealing off the universe within, and sealing him safely within his own being. And still he kept on screaming at the nothingness beyond the vast metal womb of the hive. Chapter 3. Gods, how I hate this job. Goriah looked up from her science station at the captain of the Cardassian science ship Vendikar. He was, as usual, pacing like a caged animal up and down the walkway beside her. This was not the first time that she had heard his complaint, and she strongly doubted it would be the last. Tack was a handsome young officer, with a sleek neck and very nice eye ridges, but he was, after all, both career military and something of a loser. A shame, really. He might otherwise have been at the very least an interesting diversion on this routine mission. "This is an important task we perform," Goriah said diplomatically. "Mapping the positions of a bunch of stupid rocks?" he spat, gesturing to the asteroid belt on the ship's view screen. "It's dull, it's pointless, and it's eternal." Though she, too, felt bored by the routine, Goriah felt compelled to defend their mission. "We have to be able to chart safe paths through the belt," she pointed out. The rest of the bridge crew wisely remained outside this discussion, finding their instrumentation suddenly fascinating. They were, no doubt, listening to the exchange very carefully. Though Tack was flapping his mouth foolishly, Goriah had no intention of saying anything that might cost her if it was reported back to the wrong people, as it inevitably would be. How Tack had lasted this long with such a negative attitude was inexplicable to her. "Why?" he demanded histrionically. "We're on the edge of Cardassian space here, virtually on the rim of the galaxy. There's nowhere out there to go to." He gestured at the screen. "Just more empty space. And if we had to come out here for any logical reason, we could just go around this stupid belt. No, this is just punishment work for us." He laughed bitterly. Goriah knew he'd probably had a drink or two before coming on duty. It was getting to be a habit with him of late. The longer this mission lasted, the worse he became. Another sign of a loser. "Well, I know what I'm being punished for. What's your crime, science officer?" Goriah managed a slight smile. "Curiosity," she replied, lying slightly. "I find this fascinating, so I am assigned to the job." Since the captain seemed to be quite talkative, she decided to probe further than she usually bothered. "And what was your crime?" "Foolishness," Tack replied. The crime didn't surprise her, but his admission did. He gave another of his barking laughs. "I thought I was outside the usual backstabbing." He gestured at his chest. "You wouldn't think to look at me that I was once Gul Gavran's most trusted assistant, would you?" "No," Goriah thought. "Yes," she lied. "You are obviously very capable, Captain." "Well, I was," he went on. It was hard to tell whether he'd heard her reply or not. I was his favorite and thought I was untouchable. But I forgot the most important rule in the Cardassian military. No matter how much your commanding officer likes you, he likes his rank much better. Tack made another spitting sound. When he was accused of a poor decision, I was the one he blamed for making it, even though I had advised strongly against it. Somehow that record was expunged. He glowered at Goriah. And I was reassigned. The story didn't surprise her. She knew what it was like in the Cardassian military. Actually, he was lucky he hadn't simply been executed. That was the sort of barbaric punishment they usually went in for. If he was still alive and working, no matter how pointless the task, he must have had some political connections remaining. She shrugged elaborately. "And if you perform this task well," she said, "you will undoubtedly be given a better one." "Ha!" Tack snarled. "Mapping more rocks, no doubt?" He slammed his right fist into his left palm. "I want to be out there. hunting the damned Marquis, not babysitting a bunch of female scientists." He glared at her. "No offense, science officer, but I hate being here." "And we hate having you here," she thought. She was saved from having to invent some polite response by the navigation officer. "Captain," he called, "I'm picking up something odd directly ahead of us." Tack spun around. "Identify," he ordered. "I'm sorry, sir," the navigator answered, his face twisted with puzzlement. "It does not conform to anything I have ever seen before." Tack whirled back to Goriah. "Science officer, why didn't you spot this?" "Because you were talking to me, you idiot," she thought. Ignoring his stupid question, Goriah studied her instruments, her eye ridges raised in astonishment. "Whatever that craft is," she said slowly, "it is unlike anything we have ever encountered before, or heard of either." Returning to the command seat, Tack glared at her. "I'd appreciate a few details," he told her sarcastically. "What are you talking about?" "Forward scanners," Goriah ordered. "Sector 394 green." The navigator obeyed her command, and the intruder sprang to life on their screens. Goriah had always been very curious, and had spent hours studying data from many alien species. What she saw displayed now on the Vendicar's screens reminded her mostly of a Terran fish called a manta ray. The craft had a large central body with wide-spreading wings. Behind it trailed a long tail-like antenna. Tack frowned. "It has a most unusual configuration," he agreed. "But it is not unprecedented, surely." "The shape, no," Goriah commented. "But the size—" She let her eyes stray back to her instrumentation. "Captain, that vessel is approximately 8,000 miles long, and the wingspan is about 12,000 miles. We are still almost an hour from its present position at current speeds." Tack paled, his eyes riveted to the screen. 8,000 miles? He repeated in awe. He shook his head in disbelief. "What kind of a craft is it?" he asked. Goriah shrugged. She was almost as awestruck as he, but she refused to allow her scientific training to suffer as a result. "Captain, the central core of the vessel is 8,000 miles long and approximately 100 miles in diameter. That gives an interior surface area of over 2,650,000 square miles. That is the size of a moderate continent." Bored and slightly drunk though he might be, Tack wasn't stupid. "You mean that ship is some kind of colony vessel?" he asked, leaning forward and staring hard at the image in front of him. "It would be a logical assumption," agreed Goriah, "and one probably containing several billion inhabitants." Tack gave a sharp intake of breath. "Then we had better deal with it now," he decided. He spun about to face the communications officer. "Relay a message back to Central Command on Cardassia with all of the information we currently have," he instructed. "Inform them that we are moving in to contact the alien intruder." Without waiting for acknowledgement, he turned back to the navigator. "Plot an interception course," he ordered. "Maximum velocity." Then he turned back to Goriah. "Get me as much information on the thing as you can before we reach it. I want to know exactly what we are dealing with here. Specifically, look for indications of weapons capabilities." "Man," thought Goriah in disgust. "It's about time he finally got around to attacking it." "Acknowledged." Trying to hide her feelings, she turned back to her instruments and began coaxing as much information out of them as she possibly could. Whatever that vessel was, it had clearly come from outside the galaxy. A quick backtrack of its probable trajectory showed that much. Assuming it had taken an energy-conserving course, the computers estimated that it must have come from one of the Magellanic clouds. And if it had crossed the galactic void at the low velocity it was now employing, then the journey must have taken the inhabitants almost 500,000 years. The figures were almost mind-numbing. Whoever the inhabitants of the craft were, they could not have had contact with any other species in that time. But that was about to change. Within the next hour, the Vendikar would be approaching it. Garaya worked hard, poring over her instruments, trying every last trick she could think of to gain even a meager amount of extra data from them. Finally, she stood upright and approached Tak. "I've gathered as much as I can at this range," she announced in a quiet voice. If the captain wanted the rest of the crew to share her findings, he'd tell them. To learn more, we'd need to go inside the craft. "So?" he asked her pointedly. "It's an extremely old craft," Garaya answered, striving to keep her irritation with his brusque manner in check. "Somewhere in the region of 500,000 years old. Its origin would appear to have been in one of the Magellanic Clouds. It has spent most of its life crossing the void to arrive here. Those big wings are dust-gathering devices. Their size is dictated by the need to gather the finely scattered dust in extragalactic space. This is undoubtedly turned into energy and raw materials inside the vessel." She shook her head. "It would need to be a very efficient system. The craft is proceeding at sublight speed. Given the construction of the vessel, I would not expect it to be able to exceed that velocity. To accelerate faster would undoubtedly tear the wings apart. We are therefore looking at a very slow, ponderous ship. We could literally fly rings around it." Tak tapped his fingers impatiently on the arm of his seat. "And the weaponry I specifically asked you to investigate?" he asked. Garaya paled with anger, but kept her voice even. "I am unable to detect any weapons. Our sensor devices cannot penetrate the alien ship's hull. I cannot even get a reading as to what the hull is composed of. For all I know, the aliens could be completely defenseless, or able to blast us out of space without even thinking about it." "That isn't a great deal of help to me," Tak snapped. Garaya shrugged. "It's the best I can do, for the moment." She gestured at the manta ray image. "The sensors do indicate that there are openings at the prow of the vessel, and several along the body of the ship. These are presumably airlocks and entry ports. Once we are closer, I might be able to get a scanning beam inside one of these and obtain some of the answers that you require. Until then, there is nothing that I can do." "Very well," growled the captain. He leaned forward in his seat, staring intently at the screen. "If that is all, then you may return to your post until you can get me further facts." When she didn't move, his eyes flickered over her. "Well?" "There is one thing that does puzzle me," she added. "That vessel must have smaller ships within it, surely. Explorers, shuttles, and perhaps even war vessels." "So?" "Well," she replied, her unease growing, "after 500 million years in the void, wouldn't you have launched some small ships to explore the first solar systems that you have ever seen?" She pointed to the screen. "Yet they have not. Why not?" Tak considered her question and then nodded. "A good point," he conceded. His eyes narrowed in concentration. "Their ship has been on a very long voyage," he suggested slowly. "Perhaps not a successful one." He was clearly having the same thought that had crossed her own mind. "You think, then, that there may no longer be any inhabitants within the vessel?" "It is one possibility," he agreed. He abruptly gave her a smile. "I recall reading a story once in which the inhabitants of a generation starship reverted to savagery. When their ship reached its destination, they had become uncivilized louts who couldn't even operate an airlock door. That is another possibility in this case. After all, a great deal can be forgotten in 500,000 years." "Indeed," she agreed. "Or, of course, learned. Perhaps they have entered a new stage in their evolution and no longer need machinery to do their bidding." She gave the captain a smile of her own. "I have also read such speculative fiction." Tack nodded. "Well, all we can do is wait," he said. "In a short while we will have all of the answers we need." He turned to face the communications officer again. "Open a channel using as wide a band of frequencies as you can to the ship ahead of us," he ordered. "Send our identifying code and demand a response. Inform me immediately of any reply." He turned back to Garaya. "And now we wait," he said. There was a gleam in his eyes. As she returned to her station, Garaya smiled to herself. This was certainly far more interesting than scanning rocks. And Tack seemed to have dragged the shreds of his personality together. Whatever happened now, he would be pleased. Their routine punishment mission had suddenly become something very important. If he handled it well, it would put him back in favor with the military. And if he handled it badly, then he would die. Either result would probably suit him much better than commanding survey charting. As they continued their approach, Garaya scanned and rescanned the ship, trying to eke out just a little more information. She didn't have very much luck, however. The vessel guarded its secrets well. As she couldn't penetrate its skin, she had no way of knowing whether they were approaching a floating cemetery or a mobile fortress. The uncertainty was wearing on her nerves, and she suspected that none of the crew was immune. Every now and then, Tack would start rapping his fingers nervously on his command chair arm. Then he would catch himself and force himself to stop, only to begin again a few moments later. Then finally there was a change. "Captain," she called urgently, "the sensors register the opening of the main portal in the craft." Tack glanced at the screen. "I see nothing." Fool, she thought. The prow of the craft was 100 miles across. One small portal, a mere 200 feet across, wouldn't be visible at this distance. "I'm registering smaller craft emerging," she announced. 12 of them, in a very loose formation. She tried bouncing a sensor beam past the craft and through the airlock, but it dissipated rapidly. Then the portal irised closed again. Damn. Still, now she had something other than the main ship to play with. She turned the sensors onto the smaller craft. "Each is approximately 80 feet long," she called out. "They're a lot more fragile than the main ship, and... Captain, each vessel is armed. I'm reading energy weapons powering up." "Sound alert," Tack ordered, his eyes dancing with joy. He was in his element now. "Raise shields. Power the weapons systems." The weaponry officer moved swiftly to obey. Garaya frowned. She understood the need for this move, and she had no qualms about combat, but she hated to see the loss of research material. "Any response on our hail yet?" Tack demanded. "No reply at all, Captain," the communications officer called back. "I'm running it again with greater variation in frequencies, and... Captain, incoming signal, audio only." "That's better," Tack said with satisfaction. "Put it on the speakers." There was a second or two of noise while the translation computer hooked into the signal and scanned it. Then the noise cleared into words. "Approaching craft. Identify yourself and your purpose." Tack scowled. "This is the Cardassian vessel Vendikar," he answered. "Identify yourself." "We are the Hive." The voice was neutral, without any apparent emotion. "You are entering Cardassian space," Tack said bluntly. "You will not do this without permission. Bring your ship to a halt and prepare to meet us." There was a slight pause. "Unacceptable," the voice finally replied. "We will continue our journey. You will not attempt to interfere." Sitting up straighter in his chair, Tack snapped, "You will not be allowed to enter Cardassian space. Halt your vessel now, or else we will be compelled to use force." "This contact is terminated," the voice commented coldly. The carrier went dead. Garaya scowled. "How do you propose to stop that craft?" she demanded. "We could detonate every weapon aboard our ship and still not even dent its hull." "They do not know that we are alone," Tack told her. They will not risk beginning a conflict without further information. All we have to do is hold them off until reinforcements arrive." Goriah was about to dispute that assertion, but was saved the trouble. "Incoming vessel," the navigator announced. "They have powered up their weapons for the attack." "Ready response," Tack ordered eagerly. He looked like a wild beast who had just been set free from his cage and smelled a victim ahead. "Steady all weapons." Goriah watched as two of the small craft came spinning toward them. She kept a sensor lock on them, waiting to see what kind of weapons they would be using. They were both much smaller than the Vendikar, and probably less well armed and armored. This attack was both unprovoked and foolish. There was no way at all that it could succeed. She died with that last thought on her mind. The two ships whipped past the Vendikar on opposite sides. There was no sign of any energy discharge, no sign of any weapons system being used. As their pass was completed, however, all that was left of the science vessel were tiny shards of metal and plastics, and smaller pieces of flesh that spread out in ever-widening circles, all that marked where the Vendikar had been annihilated. Chapter 4. The operation was a complete success. Hive Master Dron glanced up sharply from his position at the conference table. He shuffled his report comp rather ostentatiously until Hive Master Pacat subsided. Pacat cast his eyes down to the floor. "I am sorry for my overt enthusiasm," he said quietly. "It is good." Dron allowed a small smile to creep across his face. "And it is, in part, at least understandable. Your fledgling force has done very well, but we shall hear your report at the correct time, if you please." He gestured to one of the two empty seats at the table. Pacat, still humbled, sat beside his 13 other colleagues. Now that he had complete attention, as he always demanded, Dron could begin the meeting that he had called. He nodded to the person on his right. "You may commence recording." Every deliberation had to be kept for posterity. After all, they were at the most crucial point in the history of the Hive, and Dron had every intention of being recalled by future generations as a great visionary and savior of his people. "I see that we have one member missing." He pretended to think for a moment. "Ah, yes, our junior colleague, Torque." "He sends his apologies, Grand Master," explained Boran, 2 seats to Dron's left. "He is currently with a medic." "Nothing serious, I trust?" Dron had plans for the young rebel, and he didn't want them ruined by an untimely sickness, or worse, death. Boran cleared his throat. "I understand he was looking at the, stars, and was taken ill." There was a murmur of surprise and irritation around the table, which Dron cut off with a wave of his hand. "I am sure Torque must have had a good reason for his actions. When he recovers, he will undoubtedly explain." Privately, Dron already had a good idea what had happened, but there was no need to go on the record with that. "So, to the point of this meeting." He looked slowly at the expectant faces around the conference table. "As I am sure you are all quite aware, we have now entered our target galaxy. The crossing is complete, and we can now commence the next phase in the great design." He waited a moment for this to sink in, to see that there were no untoward displays of emotion. Though several attendees looked almost ready to burst with pride and joy, they wisely suppressed any outbursts. Nodding his satisfaction, Dron turned to Primon. "Hive Master Primon, how has the Hive borne up under the journey?" Primon was something of a fatuous fool, but he ran a tight department. His engineers were in charge of the structure and operation of the Hive. "As you know," he began, "for the past several months my engineers and I have been going through the Hive with the greatest of attention to even the smallest details. We have checked out all of the primary, secondary, and tertiary systems." He permitted himself a slight smile. "And in many cases, even the functioning of children's toys." He patted his report comp. "The statistics and results are all compiled here, and will be duly fed into the official archives. To avoid boring you with the facts and figures, though, I can summarize our findings quite simply. The hive is in far better shape than even the first hive founders could have predicted. Our people have taken good care of our world, and we have survived the crossing remarkably well. There are, of course, some repairs that need to be undertaken, but remarkably few, and none at all in any critical systems." Dron cut him off before he could keep his almost endless flow of prattle going. "It seems that every member of the hive owes you and your staff a tremendous vote of thanks, Primon. You have managed no small miracle." Dron addressed the meeting at large. "I move that we register a strong message of approval for the marvelous work that the engineers have done, both in our generation and in all previous ones. Agreed?" There was, of course, a chorus of approval. "Excellent." Dron turned back to face Primon again. "So we are in good shape for the next phase of the great design?" "We are in excellent shape," Primon replied, preening himself happily. It was remarkable how little it took to please some people. Dron sighed mentally. A few words of praise, and Primon was ecstatic. Ah, well, perhaps it would keep him silent for the rest of the meeting for once. "Commendable." Dron turned to Boran, the head of industry. "Your report, Hive Master Boran." "My departments are all ready," he replied. "As soon as the raw materials become available, then we can commence the next phase." "Good." Dron faced Makon. "And what of your department, Hive Master Makon?" Makon cleared his throat, somewhat embarrassed. He hated to be dragged away from his work for these meetings, and was obviously looking forward to the end of it so he could scuttle back. "Science is mobilized," he answered. "We are, working triple shifts at present to, analyze all details." He gestured to his comp. "All the details are here and will be, fed into the report. Summarizing, though, we have already discovered one, target world that appears perfect for our requirements." Tapping the controls before him, he called up a holographic projection of the area of space they had entered. Several dozen stars showed up, and Makon zoomed in on one. This resolved into another picture showing the yellowish star and 6 orbiting planets. "The fourth world of this system has all that we require for the next phase." "And how long will it take us to reach it?" Dron asked patiently. "The course corrections have already been fed into the guidance systems," Makon answered. "The computers indicate that we shall reach the target world in 3 days. He coughed. Of course our smaller vessels will be able to make a better determination within 2. "Thank you." Dron had already known these facts, and approved the course change, before the meeting had begun. The gathering wasn't to inform him, but the other hive masters and posterity. "Pacat, it is your turn now." Pacat nodded, barely able to contain his excitement. "As we entered this star system, we were challenged, and then attacked by a warship from a local race. They called themselves Cardassians. Despite this unprovoked attack, our warriors were able to defend themselves and annihilate the aggressor. If this is symptomatic of the reception we will get, then clearly the local species are warlike, aggressive, and no match at all for our technology." Dron was more than happy to let him brag about his department's success. It established in the record that they were not the aggressors. Not that it mattered, but Dron did like the slight moral edge it would give him. He had already altered the records of the transmission from the Cardassian ship to agree with Pacat's propaganda. "And our pilots suffered no ill effects?" "None at all," Pacat said happily. "They functioned perfectly." "Forgive me." This was Hive Master Hosir. He was the oldest among them, almost twice Dron's age, and the only member of the masters whose motives and responses Dron couldn't predict with any certainty. I do not quite understand this. Are you telling us that several of your young pilots flew an attack mission outside of the hive and came back utterly unaffected by their experience, while one of our own exalted members," he gestured at Torque's empty seat, "couldn't even look at the stars without becoming very ill?" "Yes," replied Paquette eagerly. "You see, the pilots in my craft never actually looked into space. With the help of my colleague Boran, we simply manufactured fighter craft without any external portals. All of the piloting was done by the crew using computer simulations, and it worked perfectly. To all intents and purposes, the pilots were simply undergoing another training exercise within the hive." Hosea nodded. "I see. Pardon my question." "There is no need to excuse asking a perfectly sensible question," Dron said. If he hadn't asked it, Dron would have been forced to do so. He had wanted their rather tidy solution to the problem on record. "I feel certain that we are all pleased with the resolution that Paquette and Boran have found to overcome exposure to open space." There was, of course, a murmur of assent at this. "Be it so noted," he commanded. "Now, if there are no further matters, this meeting is adjourned." Naturally, no one raised any objection to this. As the hive masters filed out to return to their duty, Hosea made his weary way across to Dron. "My compliments on resolving the agoraphobia issue." Not expecting a reply, he then limped from the conference room. In a matter of minutes, only Paquette and Raldar remained behind. Raldar had contributed nothing overtly to the meeting, but he was not expected to. He was Dron's strong right hand, and in charge of security for the hive. "Off the record now," Dron said quietly. "I am very pleased with your results, Paquette. The weaponry and pilots performed flawlessly. Training will be accelerated, of course, since we now have a target world. Everyone must be prepared." "Of course," agreed Paquette. With a happy smile and a low deferential bow, he left the room. "A very capable officer," Raldar commented. "Very," agreed Dron. "His work is progressing the great design. Now, to other matters. What is this about Torque being hospitalized? Has it to do with a female?" The security officer smiled. "Naturally. Youngsters are often driven to foolish acts when trying to impress a potential mate. But I am assured that he will be released shortly, without permanent damage." He looked out at the stars. Dron frowned. And why did he attempt such a foolish thing? Merely to impress a female? It does not sound like Torque. He is normally rather level-headed, if obstinate and filled with misplaced enthusiasm. "Ah," Raldar smiled again. "The particular female he sought to impress is most likely to be determined an astronomer." "Oh, I see." Dron chuckled. That was interesting. "He is serious about this female, then?" "Yes. She has not yet passed determination, so he can't do anything overt, of course." Dron nodded. "And Torque is far too high-minded to consider an illicit relationship, even though he knows he could get away with it." Raldar inclined his head. "He likes to think of himself as incorruptible." "I'm sure he does." The Grand Master considered for a moment. "Then I think it's time we corrupted him, don't you? I believe that this female's determination is definitely due, and I have a strong suspicion that she'll be designated an astronomer. See to it that she is then assigned to Team 2. He smiled. "I'm certain that Torque will hear about this very quickly and want to change her assignment." Nodding his understanding, Raldar said, "And he will request that her determination be changed." "Precisely. I, of course, will ensure that it is, so that he and his female can be one." Dron chuckled again. "And that first small corruption will begin his descent, Raldar. And the second step, What about that loud-mouthed, rebellious friend of his? Harl? Valdar spread his hands. He's as noxious as ever, claiming that the hive-masters must be overthrown, preferably with a lot of our internal organs decorating the walls and floors. The security officer frowned. He could be dangerous. We should execute him. Dron shook his head. He could be useful. Besides, executing a child would not be good for morale. Until he has passed his determination, we can do nothing to him. I would therefore suggest he also be given a speedy determination. And after that, he looked up at Raldar. Could one of your agents convince him to perform some small but nasty act of sabotage, preferably one with a small loss of life, say a child or two? Convince him? Raldar gave a sharp bark. I doubt he'll need much persuading. He's ready to do almost anything at the moment. He is doubly frustrated since Torque was made a hive-master. As I suspected he would be. Dron considered the matter for a moment. See that this happens, and then arrest him. We shall be forced to stage a trial at the next hive meeting. I think it would be interesting to have Torque's name chosen by accident to conduct the investigation, don't you? You mean him to have to beg for the life of his friend? Asked Raldar thoughtfully. Either that, or force him to condemn his friend to death. Dron shrugged. Either way, we shall have our solution. If he condemns his friend, then Torque will feel guilty, and he'll be easier to manipulate. If he spares Harl, his morals will be compromised, and we shall have him. In a short while, he will be with us in all things. He stood up and collected his comp. And at this momentous point in the great design, it is vital that we be unanimous in our resolve. The future of our species is at stake. We must seize the opportunity we are offered. We must fully exploit the target world to ensure the survival of the hive. Chapter 5. Cisco sidestepped the truck filled with spare parts, managing to slide onto the bridge of the Defiant. He stopped, aghast at the mess that met his eyes. Most of the panels had been removed, and it looked as though a midget with an axe and a bad temper had attacked every system in the room. Wiring, connectors, chip sheets, crystals, and circuit boards lay in total disarray. He could only hope that it looked like something very different to Chief O'Brien. There was nobody visible at first as he edged his way across the deck, carefully avoiding stepping on anything. It might only be junk, or it might be vital to the repair of his ship. There was no way to tell. As he approached the navigation console, he finally saw a pair of legs sticking out from under the mess. "Chief?" he asked, trying not to startle the engineer. "Murph," came a reply, and then the legs slid out. It was quite obvious that this wasn't the chief from the contours that emerged even before the good-looking blonde woman's face appeared. Technician Fontana removed the laser driver from her mouth. "Sorry, Captain," she said with a grin. "It's just me." Cisco smiled back at her and gestured around the bridge. "Tell me that this isn't as bad as it looks." "You want me to lie to you?" she asked bluntly. She brushed hair from her face, making another smudge that joined the dozen or so already there. "It's not too good, sir." She pointed over to the science console. "I think the chief's over there," she said, "unless the damn things swallowed him up, and that wouldn't surprise me." "Keep it down out there," a cross voice called from the indicated station. "I'm trying to concentrate." There was a flash and a curse, and then O'Brien's head emerged from behind a stack of wafer chips. "Bloody Nora," he snapped, shaking his right hand. "That hurt!" He vanished again under the console. Cisco raised an eyebrow and glanced down at Fontana. "Has he been like this long?" he asked sympathetically. "All my shift," she replied, grinning slightly. "He's a walking curse, if you ask me, Captain." "Then you won't mind if I take him out of here?" "Mind? I'll remember you in my will." She grinned wider. "Assuming the chief doesn't murder me before I can write it." Nodding, Cisco crossed the deck with exaggerated care. "Chief," he said in his sternest voice, "come on out of there." O'Brien scowled back at him from the open panel. "Look, Captain, I'm kind of busy," he complained. "Can't whatever it is wait?" "No," Cisco glowered at him. "According to Dr. Bajor, you've worked 4 straight shifts without more than a cup or 2 of coffee. I'm ordering you to take a break with me. Come on." O'Brien snorted. Typical of him to cause trouble, and exaggerate. It was 4 cups of coffee. He spread his hands in appeal. "Look, sir, I've really got a lot of work to do here, and you're getting on your staff's nerves," Cisco finished for him. "Chief, I really do appreciate the overtime you're putting in, but you're so tired you're making mistakes. Take a break, get a meal, and then sleep." He held up a hand to stifle the chief's protest. "That's an order. Do you want me to have Odo lock you up in the brig to enforce it?" With a sigh, O'Brien laid down his tools and clambered slowly to his feet. "No," he said. "He'd enjoy that far too much." He wiped off his hands on the seat of his pants. "And now that you mention it, I am kind of hungry." He looked over at Lieutenant Fontana. "Will you be okay on your own for a while?" "Okay?" Fontana gave him a wide smile. "I'll be deliriously happy, Chief. My ears are still tingling from your last bout of swearing." "I was that bad, eh?" O'Brien managed a rueful grin. "Well, don't repair too much while I'm gone. I don't want the captain to think I'm dispensable. No promises." Fontana winked at the chief, then vanished back under the console. "They're a good crew, Chief," Cisco said, as he led the way gingerly back to the elevator shaft. "They'll be fine while you get some rest." "I know that," O'Brien said proudly. "It's just that there's so much to be done," he added, his shoulders sagging. "And so much you've already accomplished," Cisco pointed out. "How much of the Defiant is back online?" The elevator doors hissed shut as they stepped in. "Well, we've restored life support and power to most decks." O'Brien scowled. "Navigation should be finished in a few hours. Fontana's doing wonders there, but weapons are still offline, and the shields are balking a bit. They took the biggest hit from that Calderisi weapon." He shook his head. "I still can't figure out quite what it was, but it did a remarkable job of burning out the command systems, even through the shields." "Well, Starfleet's sent the Hood out to the Calderisi homeworld to ask some rather pointed questions," Cisco told him. "We may have some answers for you soon. No pressure, Chief, but how long before the Defiant is back up to strength again?" The chief shrugged. "Hard to say. We can have her flying again by the end of the day, as long as you don't want phasers or more than minimal shields. Beyond that, well, I'm hoping another 2 days, but there's always something to bollocks matters up, isn't there?" Cisco nodded. "I've always felt that entropy was the fundamental ruling force in the universe," Cisco admitted. "Still, it's been remarkably quiet these past 3 days. Maybe it'll stay peaceful till you're finished." "I wouldn't want to take odds on that," O'Brien muttered. "I doubt even Quark would." "Probably not," agreed Cisco. "Now, where would you like to eat? My treat." He grinned. "There's a new Bajoran restaurant opened on the promenade that does heavenly bat-bird stew." Despair gnawed within Sana as she exited the Determination Center. She gripped her comp fiercely. Its message burned into her brain. Theoretically, the Determination was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She now had a career and was an adult. She could become one, could have a voice in the day-to-day running of the hive, and could petition the hive-masters in cases of grievance. Except, of course, in the one case that was causing her grief. Sana stumbled away from the center, not paying attention to the others about her who were heading in or out themselves. She stumbled against several of them, too numb to really care, and they were rejoicing too much to notice her. One of the ones she bumped into grabbed her suddenly. Sana started to mumble an apology, and then she managed to focus on the face of the one who held her. "Oh, Harl." "I am overjoyed to see you, too," Harl replied, his lip twisted sardonically. "I take it that you have had your determination, and that you are so delirious with happiness that you are not paying attention to the paths you take." "I have had my determination, yes," she agreed, "but I have never been so unhappy." "What is wrong?" he asked. "Did they make you a sewage worker? A sex provider?" He managed a wide smile. "I could live with that determination, though I doubt Torque could." "No," Sana answered, too upset to be either amused or offended. "I am to be an astronomer." Harl grimaced. "Oh, that is bad news. But it is what you expected, isn't it?" "Actually, it's also what I wanted," she agreed. "I prayed to the first hive for this determination. I have always longed to be an astronomer. I love to observe the stars." "Sooner you than me," Harl answered. "The only thing I'd see if there was a window open to the void would be my last meal hurtling forth from my mouth." He placed an arm gently on the edge of her shell. Technically, since she was now an adult and he was not, he was transgressing. But at this moment neither of them cared too much, and she was grateful for his touch. "So what is so wrong about getting what you wished for?" "Because I have been appointed to Team 2. "Oh." Harl was sometimes foolish, but he was not stupid. He knew what the problem was. "And Torque is on Team 1, he observed. "That is a problem." Then he twitched his nose derisively. "Still, now he is a hive master. I am sure that he will have you reassigned." Sana looked at him in shock. "He would not do that." Harl grunted. "Why not?" "Because—" Sana couldn't believe that Harl was asking such a thing. "You know very well that the determination is never wrong. The comp assesses our skills, our personalities, and our abilities, and places us where we shall be most fulfilled and most productive." "I know nothing of the sort," he told her bluntly. "You know nothing of the sort. You're just repeating what we've been taught. For all we know, the determination could be wrong any number of times. Only nobody complains about it because it is supposed to be infallible." Sana stared at him in utter bewilderment. She had known for years now that Harl was a rebel, questioning most things, but she had never dreamed that he would go this far. "The determination is the basis for our society," she said, struggling to keep her head and temper in check. "It cannot be wrong." "No wonder you'll make a good astronomer," Harl said sarcastically. "Your brains are already out there among the stars, instead of down on the deck where they belong. Look," he tried to explain, "if I told you that the stars were simply illusions, that there was nothing outside the hive, and they were just illuminations placed there to test my belief, what would you say?" "That you were simply repeating the 604th hive's heresies," she snapped back. "Nobody seriously believes that nowadays." "But they did then," he pointed out, "and with just as little proof for their beliefs as you have for the infallibility of the determination. You are a scientist, Sana, and you have a good brain. So use that brain. Ask questions. Don't simply accept what you have been told. Demand proof of it." Sana shook her head. "I would make a poor revolutionary," she replied. "I shall have to leave that to you. Meanwhile, I have to break the sad news to Torque." She stared at her friend. "I know you think he will abuse his power to have me reassigned, but I do not believe he will. He is too moral for that." Harl snorted again. "Too moral to change a stupid system in order to be one with the female he loves? I would call that too stupid." Not offended, Sana managed a weak smile. "And if he did have my determination changed, You would call that corrupt." "Yes," Harl agreed. "It's nice being a rebel. You can always find justifications for anything you wish to believe in, even if those reasons contradict something else you believe in. No one expects me to be consistent, merely obnoxious." He stroked the edge of her shell. "And, despite my temper, I do care for both you and Torque. I think he is a fool, but he probably is an honest one. Just this once, I would be happy if he did abuse his power to keep you with him. You belong together." His comp beeped. "And I belong in the center," he added. "I have been summoned for my determination also." That did cause Sana to smile briefly. "Which you do not believe in. So why are you here?" "Because until I have passed it, I am forbidden to communicate with mature females like yourself, and I do not wish that to continue." Sana looked at him fondly. "I wish you success," she informed him. "What do you believe you will become?" Smiling, he started away. "I don't know. Do you think there are any positions for revolutionaries? Anyway, with luck, maybe I'll get to be a sex provider." He shook his tail at her and vanished into the crowd again. Feeling slightly better for having talked with him, Sana returned to thinking about her woes. Harl was wrong to doubt the determination. He had to be. It was just that Harl liked to question everything. He didn't really have any doubts as to the process. He couldn't have. It was the basis of their civilization. Summoning all of her reserve, Sana tapped the code for Torque's comp into her own. She had to meet with him as soon as possible to inform him of her changed status. She had no idea what he would say, but she knew that he would be deeply saddened. "Hivemaster Torque is not available," the comp informed her. He had never refused a call from her before. Sana stared at the comp in confusion. "But why not?" she asked. "Is he ill?" "No," the comp replied. "He is in session with the other Hivemasters. It is forbidden to interrupt them." Oh. Sana knew what was happening now. It was what she had tried to tell Torque the other day, before he had insisted on staring into space and became ill. She had been doing her observations and knew that the hive was close to its target. Somewhere ahead of them in space was the world that would provide them with everything they needed to implement the great design, and the moment when she would lose Torque forever. Chapter 6. Gul Dukat sat easily in his command chair, watching the quiet efficiency of the operatives inside Cardassian Central Command. There were some 35 officers working in the room, but the noise level was low. Dukat disliked unnecessary sounds. His staff knew that and paid close heed to what they were doing, and how softly they could carry out their tasks. From this room on Cardassia Prime, the military vessels of the Empire could be monitored and controlled. Dukat enjoyed his time here, at the very heart of Cardassian strength and will. He kept close watch on what was happening through controlled space, and even the occasional problems were more stimulating than irritating. The technician at the communications desk before him half-turned in his chair. "Incoming message from the Keratan, sir," he reported. His voice was pitched perfectly to just carry to Dukat's ears. "On my screen," Dukat ordered, tapping the control to bring it to life. The face of the captain of the ship sprang into view. "Report," Dukat commanded. "We have caught up with the alien intruder," the captain answered. He looked tense and unhappy. "We can confirm the transmission from the Vendikar. The craft is several thousand miles long." "Intriguing." Dukat rubbed the back of his left hand absent-mindedly. "And is it still in Cardassian space?" "Yes, Gul," the captain answered. "But it will cross into the Durain system in just under 2 hours. There is still time for us to intercept it." Dukat sighed. "Be sensible, Captain. What would you do with a vessel that size if you did intercept it?" He was pleased to see a chastised expression on the young officer's face. "There is still no indication of how the aliens managed to destroy the Vendicar." "My science crew has been examining what wreckage we recovered," the captain replied. "All they are able to say is that the ship was literally shredded somehow in flight. Shields did not prevent the attack." It wasn't exactly a lot of information, but Ducat hadn't really expected better. "Very well, Captain," he answered. "Your orders are simple. Follow the intruder, but take no action against it unless you come under attack. Maintain sensor sweeps and observe. Report to me anything that happens." The captain scowled. "Understood," he said reluctantly. Ducat glared into his screen. "You do not like your orders?" he asked, with deceptive mildness. Some of these younger captains were quite presumptuous. Standards in the military these days were seriously slipping. "It's not that, Gull," the captain said hastily. "It's simply that, well, we are going to allow them to go unpunished for destroying one of our ships?" Ducat shook his head slightly. "What did they teach you before allowing you command of a ship?" he chided. "They will not go unpunished. However, if you tried to attack them, I have a strong suspicion that the Keratin would end up in small pieces like the Vendicar." He allowed himself a small smile. "I'm sure that doesn't appeal to you. It doesn't appeal to me. I'd then have to dispatch another ship to take your place, and that would be a waste of time. As you reported, the intruder is about to enter the Durain system. This will make it a Bajoran problem. Let them attack the vessel and have their ships destroyed. You will monitor the event and record it. This way, we can discover what weapons the aliens possess, without your having to lose your life, and my having to sacrifice a science vessel. Now do you understand?" The captain smiled. "Yes, Gull," he replied, admiration in his voice. "It is a sound plan." "Of course it is," Ducat informed him. "So obey my instructions to the letter. Out." End of Side 1. Side 2. Objective Bajor by John Peel. Continuing on page 41. He snapped off the contact and settled back in his seat. Hardly a promising officer, but you had to make do with whatever tools were at hand. He considered his next move. The intruder was about to become a Bajoran problem, which amused him. Let those weaklings try and figure it out. Of course, their first response was likely to be a request for aid from Captain Sisko on Deep Space Nine. They always went mewling to him for help at the slightest provocation. That would be interesting. The Federation was a lot more likely than the Bajorans to get answers about this vessel. And if the Keratin paid proper attention, then Ducat would get the information too. A ship, 8,000 miles long. Normally, technology didn't greatly impress Ducat, unless it was in the field of weaponry, but this was no mean achievement. The secrets that the intruder revealed might prove to be quite helpful. Should he give Sisko a call and alert him to the incoming problem? It would be a friendly gesture, after all, and Ducat enjoyed being friendly with the human, from time to time. As humans went, Sisko was almost likable. On the other hand, there was no need to overdo friendship. Why not simply let the Bajorans send for Sisko and leave him in the dark? It might be more fun to watch him fumble his way about without help. Yes, that was it. Wait and see what happens, Ducat decided. He had a feeling that the intruder was up to something interesting in the Durain system. It would be educational to see just what that might be. Dron surveyed the conference room and noted with satisfaction that every hive master was present, including Torque. The youngster looked a trifle pale, but otherwise unaffected by his recent experience. He might be an idealistic fool, but he was obviously also resilient. There was an air of excitement in the room, as everyone already knew what was happening. Dron indicated that the recording was to begin, and then rapped on the edge of the table. "Hive masters," he said in a strong, clear tone, "the hour of fate is upon us. The next stage in the great design is about to commence. Macarn?" The science master shuffled to his feet. The target planet has been selected," he announced. "It is the 4th planet from the Sun that we are now approaching. It is a world of some small industry which will be of assistance to us, and it contains much vegetation. Preliminary surveys indicate a fair amount of mineral and metallic wealth on the planet, though there has been extensive mining already performed there. We assume this was done by an off-planet species, since there is little evidence of much refined metal on the surface of the world." Dron glanced at him sharply. "There will be sufficient remaining for our needs, though." Yes, without doubt," Macarn responded. "There will be no delay in the great design." "Excellent." Relieved, Dron turned to Paquette. "And how is our readiness?" "We have 3 wings of attack vessels standing ready," Paquette reported. "The pilots have all achieved high scores in simulated runs, and I anticipate no problems. Our surveys show fewer than 100 vessels currently in flight in the system, and their weaponry is inferior to ours." Torque shuffled in his seat and leaned forward. "You are preparing to attack the inhabitants?" he asked, concern in his voice. "We are preparing to defend ourselves," Paquette answered, snuffling loudly to show his displeasure. "Had you attended the last meeting, you would know that the local race, calling themselves Cardassians, attacked our ships without provocation when last we met them. I am sure that none among us wishes to wait until they attack again before we prepare to defend ourselves." He stared pointedly at Torque, who sat back in his seat and closed his mouth. "If that is quite clear?" asked Dron. There were no further comments. He hadn't expected there would be. Even Torque couldn't complain about defending themselves. "Boran?" The industry master stood up. "My teams are all prepared," he reported proudly. "We stand ready to harvest the coming fruits of our labor. Production is completely ready to commence as soon as the raw materials are obtained." "Excellent," Dron complimented him. "Then it is clear that we are ready, that the great design can go ahead. After 500,000 years, the plans of the first hive come to fruition, and we achieve our destiny." He gestured at the holographic representation of the planet that spun in the air above the table's surface. "All departments will come to full strength," he commanded. Turning to his security master, he said, "Raldar, the time has come to speak with these Cardassians in this system. Have a link established immediately." "Of course," Raldar agreed. He set about tapping instructions into his comp. What only Dron and he knew was that there would be several layers of recording taken when they established contact. Dron couldn't take the chance that something might go amiss and spoil the records he intended to be kept for future hives. However, if the aliens said or did anything untoward, it could be redesigned in the records, Dron decided. A moment later, the spinning globe above the table was replaced by a hologram of an alien race, the first that the other hive masters had ever seen. There was a murmur of shock and disgust from those assembled about the table. Even the liberal Torque and the elderly Hosir couldn't restrain themselves. Well, the alien was ugly. It was also quite obviously not a Cardassian, but there was no need to mention that. This might be some subject species, for example. The being was roughly the size of a member of the hive, and it stood upright, but that was about all the resemblance there was. It, possibly a he, was shell-less, and its skin was a pallid pink instead of a rich gray. There was hair visible on the crown of its ugly head, and the being wore what appeared to be cloth draped over the larger part of its body. Dron wasn't too surprised. A creature that grotesque would have to cover itself. The being spoke for a moment, and then the translation computers could begin to decode its vocalizations. "First Minister Warren, of Doraine 4, the creature was saying. Please identify yourselves." Dron took a breath, and then said, "I am Hive Master Dron of the Hive. You will leave your world immediately. We will allow you 2 days to evacuate your population." "What?" Was this alien stupid as well as deformed? Dron repeated his message patiently. "Do you comprehend?" he added. "You're insane," Warren finally spluttered. "No," Dron answered. "We are not insane. You have 2 days. If you require assistance in evacuating your people, we will be willing to assist." He moved to cut the communication. "Wait!" Warren exclaimed, holding up a hand. You're serious about this?" "Of course we are serious," Dron replied. "This is not a matter we would joke about." "But you can't be." The alien looked almost panic-stricken. "What you ask is unthinkable." "Unthinkable," he explained, "and we are not asking. We will allow you 2 days, and then we shall commence harvesting this world. If your people are not removed by then, they will simply have to suffer the consequences. We have no desire to injure anyone, but we will not alter our schedule." "No!" Warren seemed to have a grip on whatever low intelligence he possessed. The message had obviously sunk at least part way into his brain. "This is our world, and you cannot have it without a fight." Dron had been afraid of this. The alien was clearly insane. "You are not utilizing the world," he explained. "We have need of it, and therefore we shall make use of it. Please stand aside and allow us to do this." "Doraine 4 is our home," cried Warren. "We won't let you have it." "Home?" Dron shook his head in astonishment. "You are clearly not an intelligent species if you believe that a ball of mud and rock is a home. It is simply a resource, neither more nor less. You are not using it, so we shall." "He can't be serious," muttered Primon to the table at large. "He thinks that this world is his home? What kind of deviants are these people?" "The kind we will have trouble with," predicted Paquette. "They're obviously intelligent enough to build crude weapons, but too stupid to build a home of their own." Warren had been conferring with someone out of Dron's line of sight, in feverish haste. He now turned back to face the hive-master. "You will cease your flight," he ordered. "If you move any further into our system, we shall take it as a declaration of hostile intent, and will be forced to defend ourselves." This was going far better than Dron had imagined possible. It was quite obvious to all the others about the table that they were being threatened first. There would be no need to edit this recording at all. "We are not an aggressive species," Dron replied carefully. "We do not wish you any harm, but we need the planet that you call," he shuddered, "home. If you try to interfere with the great design, we shall be forced to retaliate. Any injuries or deaths your people sustain will therefore be your own fault." "You're not having our planet!" Warren howled, and cut the communications link. Dron allowed the picture to fade, and waited a few heartbeats before he spoke again. "It appears that we are dealing with a dangerously deranged species," he said sadly. "Paquette, it would appear that your brave pilots will be forced to defend the hive." "And they all stand ready," Paquette answered proudly. "The alien aggressors will not harm the hive. That I vow." "Good," Dron smiled. "We all knew that we could count on you." He spread his hands in resignation. "Well, we tried to do this without pain and bloodshed. Unfortunately, these aliens seem to completely lack logical faculties. We will be forced to fight them for what we need. Are there any further questions or comments?" As he had expected, Torque stood up. Is this really necessary? He asked. Dron could see the pain on his face, his nose wrinkling almost uncontrollably. Must we kill to obtain what we need? We all heard their spokesman, Dron told him. They threatened us. Any killing will begin with them and be on their own consciences. No, I mean, is there no other world we can use instead? Torque explained. One without such insane inhabitants. I am reluctant to condone the removal of a species that is obviously so feeble-minded. As are we all, Dron agreed hypocritically. Sometimes decisions simply needed to be made and then enforced. And there are indeed further worlds that offer what we need. Then why do we not use one of them? Asked Torque almost desperately. Macarn? Prompted Dron. Because they lie beyond this one, the science master explained, and we shall indeed use them. Once the process of deconstructing Durain 4 is finished, then we shall need at least 2 further worlds. And there is no telling whether their inhabitants will be any less maniacal than the ones here. We must face the possibility that we could be in an area of space whose inhabitants are all terminally deranged. Thank you. Dron signaled for Torque to reseat himself. None of us wish harm even to such a sub-intelligent species, but we have no choice. If they attack us, we will defend ourselves. Durain 4 will be the source of material for the next stage in the Great Design. Now, if there are no further comments, can I ask for a sign of assent? Pacat and Raldar signified their approval instantly. One by one, the rest of the Hive Masters complied. As expected, Torque's vote was the last, but even he had agreed. So be it, Dron announced. The Great Design goes forward today. Gul Dukat watched the transmission from the Karatan with great interest. The messages between the intruder and Durain 4 had been intercepted. The aliens were not backing down, and those idiotic Bajoran colonists on Durain 4 were equally stubborn. The intruder's craft was advancing into the Durain system, and the small fleet of ships the colonists possessed were massing to meet it. This should prove to be a most interesting day. Chapter 7. Warren turned to his aide in near panic, rubbing the bridge of his nose between thumb and forefinger, as he always did when worried. He snapped, "Those maniacs are going to destroy our world." He forced himself to think for a moment. "Get Major Morrell, and order an immediate launch of every fighting vessel we have. Tell him our very existence depends on his skills." "Yes, sir," the aide said with alacrity, vanishing toward the communications room. Hurrying that way himself, Warren tried hard not to collapse in shock. It was unthinkable that anyone would be doing just what the alien intruders threatened, but they were quite clearly as serious as they were demented. Given the size of the incoming ship, he was virtually certain that they'd never hold this attack off alone. He needed help, and he needed it fast. Entering the communications room, he rushed to the nearest console. "Clear whatever you're doing immediately," he snapped, "and open a channel to Bajor, highest priority." "Yes, sir." The woman obeyed promptly, simply cutting the channel she'd been using and opening a new one. "Whom shall I ask for?" "First Minister Shakar, and no one else," Warren answered feverishly. He tapped his fingers on the top of the console impatiently as the woman patched through the call. A moment later, Shakar's harried-looking face appeared on the screen. "Yes?" he asked, an edge in his voice. "I'm very busy, so—" "Durain 4 is under attack by an unknown alien species," blurted out Warren, unable to contain his panic any longer. "They've threatened to destroy our world and kill us all." Shakar's face went almost blank, but Warren could see in his eyes that he was thinking fast. "All right," Shakar snapped. "Hold them as long as you can. What kind of defense do you have?" "Not much," Warren answered. just a few dozen interceptors. We never dreamed that anything like this could ever happen." "I'll mobilize whatever forces I can to help," Shakar promised, "and I'll contact Captain Sisko for help from the Federation. Keep this channel open and send us all the information you can." He looked away from the screen. "You," he called, "over here. Record everything that comes through at this board." He turned back to Warren. "Do your best. Help is on its way." He moved out of sight, and a young woman took his place. Warren wrung his hands together. Help is on its way. But from Bajor, 2 systems away. It would be hours before anyone could arrive, assuming they were already in space. As for help from the Federation, how long would that take? By treaty with the Cardassians, they weren't allowed any permanent show of force in this sector. Any starships they'd send would have to take days to get here. It looked very, very bad for Durain. "All units," Morrell transmitted, "signal in and identify yourselves." He stood on the bridge of the Morven Falls, the largest ship in the Duranian fleet. Largest? It was a smallish battlecruiser with a crew of 58. It didn't have the firepower to take out a starship, let alone whatever their unknown enemy might fling at them. And judging from what his sensors were showing, the aliens must have a tremendous force. Their main vessel was thousands of miles long. How many attack ships might it hold? Still, it was all irrelevant. There was no question of his duty and his responsibility. He had to do his best to defend Durain 4, and at the very least buy the planet all the time he could, until reinforcements arrived. "All ships reported in," his first officer announced. She grimaced slightly. 86 ships, most of them low-level interceptors. We've got just 3 further cruisers, sir." "Then that will have to be sufficient," he replied firmly. "Anything yet on the aliens?" "Not yet." She gestured at the screen, where the huge ship was already visible, even though it was still half the system away. "They've not launched anything at all." She chewed her lip uncertainly. "Do you think the whole craft is a fighter?" "We'd better pray it isn't," he answered. "If it were, I can't think of anything this side of a Borg ship that might be able to stop them." He considered for a moment. "All right. Signal all ships to begin closing in. Let's take the battle as close to the enemy as we can." She nodded. "All ships," she called out, "prepare for action. Target ahead, bearing 190 Mark IV. Distance—" Tuning her out, Morrell studied the image on the screen ahead of him. What kind of weapons do they have, he wondered, and why are they so arrogant, so confident? Paquette moved closer to Dron. All of the Hive Masters were still in the conference room, and would be until the battle was over, but they had broken into smaller clumps to talk quietly. Only Dron sat alone, watching his comp to keep up to date with everything that was happening. "They have launched attack vessels," Paquette reported. "They have begun the fight." "Excellent." Dron gave his friend a smile of satisfaction and confidence. "Nothing your pilots cannot handle, I take it?" "Of course not." Paquette sounded slightly shocked at the mere thought. "At your word, I will launch the first flight." Dron considered for a moment, then decided. "Allow them to get closer," he said. "I want it perfectly clear that they have commenced this action. They are scared," he added. "They will fire the first shots. Then annihilate them." "Understood." Paquette moved off to his communications station. His eagerness for the impending battle showed in his jaunty steps. Dron smiled again. The great design was almost upon them, and he had the honor and glory of leading the Hive to their destiny. He glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the other Hive Masters. They all looked tense, but none of them looked worried, except for Torque. He was as nervous as a shallot tossed in water. And he was talking animatedly with that old fool Hosir. Dron frowned. What did the two of them have in common? Then he shrugged the matter off. It wasn't really important. Neither of them had voiced any dissent to his policies. Neither of them would dare to object to the implementation of the Great Design. "Target closing fast," the first officer reported. Morrell nodded. Still no sign of their ships? He was juggling plans in his head. With his small fleet, there was no feasible way of attacking the main vessel. "Not yet," she answered. "And how about sensor readings on the intruder itself?" "They reveal nothing at all," the first officer reported. "The sensors simply seem to slide off that metal. If it is metal, I can't read anything at all inside the craft. City, whatever it is. There are several places in the skin of the ship that look like portals, and—" She broke off and bent over her screen. "Sir, one of the portals is opened. The aliens have launched 100 ships. On screen," Morrell ordered. The picture flickered and then showed a close-up of one section of the intruder. A portal had irised open, and dozens of small, dart-like ships were flooding out. Interestingly, they traveled in pairs. Morrell's mind clicked on this. Was this an attack formation, or did they have some kind of need to be together? "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Engage the enemy at will." "Yes, sir." She bent to the panel to issue the order. Morrell studied the ships as they spiraled out from the alien craft. They were smaller even than most of his ships. They didn't look to be that formidable. Why, then, did he have a very bad feeling about this? "Weapons," he called out. "Primed and ready," the gunner answered. "Shields at maximum." "Take us in," he ordered the helmswoman. "Sublight drive at half, full sensor sweeps." He turned back to his first officer. "Any readings on those craft?" She studied her board. "Similar metallic construction to the intruder," she replied thoughtfully. "Not as dense, but still almost impossible to break through. I read the power source from its reactor, but no sign of weapons buildup. They do possess shields." She scowled. "Pretty good ones, too." "No weapons?" Morrell shook his head. "That doesn't make sense," he complained. "They're intercepting us. They must have some sort of weapons." "I'm not reading any energy buildups," she insisted. "Nothing to show that any weapons systems we know are being brought online." What was going on here? Morrell nervously chewed at his thumbnail. "What about projectile weapons? Maybe they weren't very sophisticated." "Nothing that I can detect," she replied, sounding as puzzled as he did. "There's nothing at all that I can pinpoint as a weapon on any of those ships." "Suicide bombers?" he mused. Maybe their plan was to collide with the Duranian craft and explode themselves and their targets. "There's no sign of them trying to overload their reactors," the first officer objected. "Surely they'd do that to take out another ship." "Maybe," Morrell agreed uncertainly. He'd never encountered anything like this. The alien ships, all in pairs, were now targeting his ships and moving to intercept. What kind of soldier went into battle without weapons? The answer was obvious. None. They had to have some kind of weapon. So, what was it? "Careful," he muttered to himself as the first of his interceptors sped toward the spreading alien ships. "They're up to something." And then the firing began. The two lead ships phasered blasts at the closest of the enemy ships. There was a brief flare of shields. "Report!" barked Morrell. "The alien ship's shields are standing," his first officer answered. "They're very strong from the prow," she added. "Built to take attack." He nodded his comprehension of the report, and through narrowed eyes surveyed the images on the screen. The enemy still hadn't fired back, and there was no sign of any weapons. What was going on here? The first of the twinned alien ships approached one of his interceptors. Morrell concentrated on seeing what they were going to do. Apparently they did nothing. Each of the ships simply passed the interceptor by on opposing sides. leaving only minute wreckage as the interceptor seemed to just disintegrate in space. "What the hell happened?" Morrell growled, frustrated, puzzled, and furious. "What did they do?" His first officer looked up, stunned. "I don't know," she answered. "They didn't use any kind of energy at all. The ship just fell apart." "Ships don't just fall apart," he exclaimed. "They must have done something, and I want to know what." His eyes were riveted to the screen when 2 more alien ships passed over and below a second interceptor. Like the first, it seemed to simply fall apart as it fell, dissolving into tiny, indetectable pieces. What was going on here? What kind of weaponry did these aliens possess? And was there any defense against it? Morrell knew he didn't have very long to discover the answer to that. Phaser blasts seared across the screen again, but their energy was dissipated against unflagging shields. A 3rd and 4th interceptor simply ceased to exist. They were losing this battle. He was losing his men, and the aliens were simply plowing through his ships as if they didn't exist. Once they had passed, the ships didn't exist. Torque stood nervously, clenching and unclenching his hands as he watched the holographic representation of the battle above the conference table. The aliens had begun the fight, true, but they were being annihilated by the hive forces. Why did he feel so bad inside? "It is never very pleasant to watch anyone die," Hosea told him gently. "I know. I'm very old, and I've seen most of my friends, colleagues, and family die." He gestured at the ongoing battle. "Even if they are aliens and insane, it is still regrettable that they perish." "Yes," Torque agreed. "I wish it had not come to this. If they had only been reasonable." Hosea smiled. "If snarks had wings, maybe you could train your breakfast to come to you," he quoted. "What is, is. That is another thing you learn with age. Regrets help no one, least of all the one who regrets. These aliens are what they are. We are what we are." He pointed again at the whirling images. "Because of that, this was inevitable." Torque sighed. "And how many more times will it be inevitable?" he asked. "That depends on the aliens in this new galaxy, youngster." Hosea sighed too, a long, protracted sound. "To be honest, I am afraid we may be compelled to repeat this every time. Still, let us try and speak of less violent matters. You are new to the Hive-Master status, and I know very little about you. Tell me about yourself." Unable to tear his gaze away from the battle, Torque wrinkled his nose slightly. "This is not the time to speak of peaceful things." "On the contrary," the oldster answered, "now is the perfect time. When wars wage without," he quoted, "there is only peace within." Actually, Torque couldn't help but reply, the original reads, "When war is without, seek peace within." Does it indeed? There was a hint of a smile on Hosea's face. How could I have misquoted so badly? "It is not your fault, sir," Torque said quickly, thankful he hadn't caused offense with his unthinking reply. "It is just that, well, I am a scholar of the texts. I have been researching them for some time." "And you found errors?" asked Hosea, obviously being deliberately provocative. "Not that," Torque said, aghast. "Merely some small changes." "Indeed?" Hosea seemed to be genuinely interested in hearing what he had to say, unlike most of the elders. Torque had been afraid that his research might have brought him trouble. Instead, they had brought him the badge of a hive-master. "You no doubt recall the time of the 203rd hive," he said. "Not personally," Hosea answered, laughing. I'm not quite that ancient. But I know all the stories of the mutineers, and their overthrow, of course, and their attempts to change the texts and alter our great design. But nothing came of it." "Not exactly," Tork answered. "You see, I studied the commentaries from the early hives, 204 through 7 specifically." Hosier's nose twitched. "Not many now read those commentaries," he said slowly. "They've been considered obsolete and generally pretty foolish for 50 millennia. I hope you have not been too influenced by them." "Not the commentaries," Tork agreed with a bark of derision. "I assure you they are just as foolish as legend has it. No, what interested me is the way the scholars quoted the texts. Their versions are very similar to ours, but in some cases they differ slightly, as in the quote you just used. Now, it seems to me that the ancient scholars were much, much closer to the texts than we are, and would therefore have known them better. To misquote them, and to do so quite consistently, is hard to believe." "And you chose to believe instead?" prompted Hosier. "My conclusion was that there have been some minor alterations to the texts over the millennia," Tork answered slowly. "Nothing large, nothing significant, but changes nonetheless." "An intriguing suggestion," Hosier said dryly, "and not a popular one, I would wager. So, how is your research progressing?" "Not too well," admitted Tork. "Being a hive-master is virtually a full-time occupation, and with the great design now so close to fulfillment—" He spread his hands helplessly. Hosier nodded, and then directed his gaze across the table. Tork followed suit, and saw that Dron was watching them closely. As soon as he realized he had been seen, Dron looked away. "I wonder if that is why you were made a hive-master," mused Hosier, "so that you wouldn't have time for your research." Tork couldn't follow this. "I am sorry, I do not understand." Hosier gave a throaty chuckle. "In my youth, I was a bit of a rebel, too," he confessed. "In a hive would be. Perhaps you have been kept deliberately too busy to continue your studies. It is worth considering, you know. After all, if the texts have been changed, only the hive-masters could have done the work. And I doubt the current Grand Master would want that fact known." Startled by this, Tork exclaimed, "You cannot be suggesting what it sounds as if you are." "Can I not?" Hosier shrugged. "I am old. Perhaps I am too old. Perhaps my words get away from my brain." His nose wrinkled. "Or perhaps you are too young to be dedicated completely to the truth." He patted the youngster on the shell. "Think about what I have said, and then think about what you will do about it." Kira glanced up as her board registered an incoming message from Bajor. It had been pretty peaceful on the station for the past few days, if she ignored 2 fights in Quarks, 1 smuggling arrest, and several minor breakdowns. It had seemed even quieter since O'Brien and his engineers had been spending most of their waking hours working on the Defiant, trying to get it spaceworthy once again. It was strange not to see him fiddling with the systems here in Ops. This was probably nothing but a routine call, but Kira felt a little tense as she punched the command to bring the call up on her screen. Her worries faded as she saw Shakar's face. "Shakar!" she exclaimed in delight. She had fought under his superb leadership as a freedom fighter, while Bajor had been occupied by the Cardassians, and now sadly saw far too little of him. "I haven't heard from you since you won the election. By the way, I haven't This isn't a social call, Nerys," he said tightly, and Kira stopped talking. There was pain in every line on his handsome face. "Can I speak to Captain Sisko, please? It's most urgent." 10 seconds, she promised, recognizing the urgency in his voice. She glanced up at Sisko, who was conferring with Dax in low tones at the science station. "Captain," she called, "First Minister Shakar is calling. Extremely urgently for you." Cisco sighed. "If it's not one thing," he muttered. He strode across the room to her panel. Kira moved aside to give him access, but remained close enough to hear what was said. "First Minister, it's always a pleasure." "Not this time," Shakar said bluntly. "I've just received a distress call from Durain 4. They're under attack by some unknown alien species and need help desperately. I've already dispatched what ships I can spare, but—" "Understood," Cisco answered. Kira could see the tension grip him as he spoke. "I'll do what I can. We'll contact you again when we're on our way. Cisco out." He cut the line and turned to Kira. "Tell O'Brien that the Defiant is leaving now," he ordered. "Assemble the crew. I'm going to punch through a request for aid from Starfleet." Kira knew she had to state the obvious. "Captain, the Defiant is still not repaired. According to O'Brien's last report, there's still only partial shields, and the weapons aren't online." "I'm aware of that, Major," Cisco said softly. "But do you want us just to sit here and do nothing?" She shook her head vehemently. "Neither do I. Tell him we launch in 15 minutes, and he can do whatever work he's able to in transit. But battle-ready or not, we launch." Chapter 8. The battle was faring far worse than Morrell could ever have feared. So far, over 20 of his small fleet had been annihilated by the aliens' peculiar weapon, and none of the enemy's ships had been even damaged. The intruders were well protected, and the few Duranian ships were not well armed. This had never been considered a dangerous system, and the need for defense had seemed slight. What he would give for a single dreadnought right now. But this was not the time for wishful thinking. Morrell called out to his first officer, "Order Red Flight to attack the 6 alien ships on heading 109 Mark IV. I want 2 ships to go for the head-on assault, and the other 4 to try from behind. Tell Red Leader to single out one of the intruders and attack it with all of their firepower." She nodded. "An idea?" "A hope." In fact, it was more of a wish, but Morrell had little else to try. In all of the attacks, the intruders had always flown in pairs, a precise distance apart. Whatever their weapon, perhaps it required 2 ships for it to be effective. In which case... He watched the schematics as Red Flight whirled to meet the targeted enemy craft. Morrell tensed as he saw 2 of his ships flying directly for the 3 pairs of alien vessels. The other 4 of his ships boosted, spun, and came whipping in from the rear of the aliens. All 4 opened fire on a single ship. "Their shields are overheating," his first officer reported. "If they can keep this up just a short while longer—" There was a burst of white light from the screen. "1 alien down," she called, elated. Then, grimly, 2 of Red Flight are also destroyed. They were bad statistics, but Morrell felt a little happier knowing that the intruders could be taken out. "And the destroyed ship's partner?" he snapped. The first officer studied her screen. "It's pulling away," she reported. "Red Leader is initiating pursuit." "No," Morrell ordered. "Let it go. Tell him to target another ship instead." His hunch had been correct, then. The enemy had to fight in pairs. "We only need to destroy 1 of each duo to stop the attacks. Order all units to so target their attacks. We can beat them," he added, trying to sound a lot more confident than he felt. They had destroyed 1 enemy ship, at a cost of almost 24 of their own. At this rate, the battle wouldn't take long, and his forces would be utterly annihilated. Paquette glanced up from the projection, grimly. "One of our ships has been destroyed," he reported to Dron. "Its partner is returning to the hive." "How soon will the next flight be ready?" Dron asked. "Very shortly," the defense minister answered. 2 time units at most. The natives cannot possibly destroy many more of our ships." Dron nodded his understanding and then turned to Boran. "How soon before we can commence extractions?" "In slightly less than 3 units," he replied. The generators are almost at peak. The fields are beginning to be generated. As soon as we are in orbit of this world, we can start our work." "Good." Dran studied the projection of the battle again. "The fewer of our youngsters who die, the better." He clenched his fist as if clutching at the planet ahead of them. "And the aliens will pay for this attack of theirs." "Give us full power," Sisko ordered as he took the command chair on the Defiant. O'Brien sighed. "I wish I could, Captain." He shrugged. 80%'s about the best you'll get. And there's still no weapons online. Fontana's working on them right now, but I can't promise anything." "I know, Chief," Sisko said gently. "Whatever's humanly possible, I know that you'll accomplish. But we must try to help." "Aye," O'Brien agreed. "We'll do all that we can." "Helm ready," Dax reported. "Course plotted and laid in." Sisko nodded and glanced around the bridge. It was a lot tidier than before, with most of the circuit boards replaced, and all of the non-repaired material removed. "Then let's go," he said simply. "Warp as soon as we possibly can." "Understood," Dax assented. She tapped in the codes, and the umbilicals attaching the Defiant to Deep Space Nine were retracted. Dax nudged the ship away with the thrusters, then switched to impulse. They streaked away from the station, which hung in view on the main screen. Sisko wondered with a pang whether any of them would make it back again. There was so much still to be done. And there was Jake, waiting there. Would he see his son again? Shrugging off the depressing thoughts, Sisko tried to concentrate on the mission. Even without weapons, there had to be something that they could do to help out. Didn't there? Startled by the sudden chime that shattered her train of thought, Sana answered her comp. Harl's face floated out from the screen. Disappointed, she said, "Harl." "Yes, I know you were hoping it was Torque instead," her friend said, his nose twitching. "Sorry it was just me. You have not managed to reach him yet and tell him about your predicament?" "No," Sana answered. "He is in a meeting with the other Hive Masters and cannot be disturbed." "Well, I know why," Harl informed her. "The Great Design is underway, Sana. We are ready to begin Phase 2. Sana stared at his image. "How can you know that?" He gave a barking laugh. "I have just had my determination," he informed her. "I am now a proud processor. Imagine that. And I have been told that we are in emergency working conditions. Preparations have begun. You know what this means, don't you?" Icy dread clutched at her shell. "Yes," she said softly. "I knew that we were approaching our target star. We must now be preparing to mine it for everything we need." "Exactly. And Torque and the other Hive Masters are in session because there are aliens on this world. They are refusing to allow us to take what we need." Sana let that thought sink in. "Then we are at war?" she asked, using the unfamiliar word. "Yes." Harl's face twisted in anger. "Those bastards have finally done it, Sana. They're planning to wipe out an alien civilization to take what we need. And Torque has obviously gone along with their plans. Now what do you think of his lofty morals?" Sana felt the shock of Harl's accusation sinking into her stomach. She could not believe that Torque would ever agree to anything immoral, let alone the destruction of a race of alien creatures. Harl had to be wrong. He had to be. "I do not know," she said finally, "but I will discover the truth." She stood up, determined to act. "I shall go to the Hive Master's chambers and demand to speak with Torque." "They'll never allow it," Harl replied. "They will have to kill me to stop me," Sana said simply. "I must know the truth." Harl hesitated and then nodded. "You are brave, Sana. Listen, there is one here I am assigned to work with who shares my views about the Hive Masters. We are evolving a plan to create a little trouble." "Harl," she protested. afraid for her friend. He was so hot-tempered, and if he wasn't careful, he might do something very foolish. "You are an adult now," she admonished him, "and can be punished for your actions instead of merely being reprimanded." "I know that," he answered. "I am not stupid. I will be careful. Take care in your turn. And—" He grimaced again. "I know how hard it is for you to think ill of Torque, but you must be prepared to see that he may have already changed. He is a hive-master now." "He is a hive-master now," Sana agreed. "But he has been Torque all of his life. He will not change." She lowered her head slightly. "But I, too, am not stupid. I will hear what he has to say, and I shall make my own decisions." Harl nodded. "Be strong," he said, and then cut his transmission. Her head whirling, Sana left her small apartment. It was not far to the chambers, and she could make it in 2 units or less. It would give her time to decide what she would say to Torque, if she was allowed to see him. Despite her words earlier, she was not sure that she would be allowed to see him. And then, what would she do? "What can you tell me about Durain 4? Sisko asked Major Kira quietly, as he stood beside her. "Is it likely to be defended?" "Hardly." Kira's face twisted as she brought back her memories. "The place was originally a Cardassian slave camp. It's rich in deposits of many metals. The Cardassians shipped Bajorans there to work in the camps and then die. We finally liberated the planet, but we were unable to bring every prisoner back to Bajor." Kira paused and took a deep breath. "There were over 400,000 prisoners, many in poor health. The provisional government sent what medical supplies we could manage to help out, along with some able-bodied volunteers. The former slaves became farmers and colonists." She grimaced. "Until now it was actually shaping up pretty well. Durain's soil is good for crops, and almost anything can grow there. Bajor's been importing food from them, and the colonists have done pretty well for themselves." She sighed. "They've got a few ships, Captain, mostly old and many obsolete. They wouldn't stand up well to a spitting match, let alone a firefight." Sisko had been afraid of that. Shakar said he was sending what aid he could. "And I'm sure he has," Kira agreed. "The problem is that it isn't much. You know we don't have many ships, Captain. If this invader is serious, they could wipe out Durain without even working up a sweat." She slammed her fist down on her console. "Damn it! And we don't even have our weapons capability. We're walking into a war zone without any protection. What can we do?" "I'm not sure, Major," Sisko admitted. "But whatever we can do, we shall. We can only pray that it doesn't result in a shooting match." Trying not to allow the worry in his heart to show on his face, Sisko walked slowly back to his command chair and sat down. From all reports, the situation was not good, and it didn't look like it would get any better. If only it didn't get any worse. "What are they doing now?" Morrell stared at his screen, puzzled. The battle, if you could use such a term for this one-sided fight, was trickling out. Most of his ships had been destroyed by the enemy. They had managed to take out 6 of the aliens, but that was all. In the past few minutes, 6 heavy interceptors had arrived from Bajor. Their firepower was much greater than that of any of Morrell's ships, but they were just as vulnerable to the enemy weapon. 2 of the new arrivals were already floating dust. And now this. The huge alien intruder had slowed considerably. It was approaching Durain 4 now, within a few thousand miles. It looked like a huge predatory fish attacking a smaller ball-shaped prey. Morrell didn't know what was going to happen, but it didn't take a genius to guess that whatever it was, it wouldn't be good. "I'm picking up energy readings from the craft that are off the scale," the first officer called in alarm. "They're powering up some incredible stuff in there, sir. Energies like none I've ever seen." "Prophets!" swore Morrell. To the communications officer he added, "Get through to Warren and the council. Tell them that they'd better get everyone off Durain that they can." He stared in shock and horror at the enemy vessel. What was going on? The two spread wings started to move. It looked like an unhurried folding of the wings to envelop the planet, but Morrell knew that the process only seemed slow because of the scale. Those wings had to be moving at incredible speeds. The intruder was starting to enfold Durain in its terrifying embrace. "Power levels rising," the first officer said, choking. "Whatever they're going to do is about to start." As Morrell stared helplessly at the screen, the undersides of both wings started to glow with power. Crawling, flickering tubes of incandescent light slashed across the metallic surface. The power buildup was enormous. The lights glowed, writhed, and burnt their way across the wings. Then, like some student science experiment on static electricity, the bolts suddenly snapped across the intervening space from the enveloping wings and into the planet's atmosphere. "Prophets!" Morrell breathed in horror. Slashing across the skies of Durain, the blinding bolts of light finally connected with the surface of the planet. Wherever the beams touched, huge clouds of dust, smoke, and vapor rose. The clouds then started to rise toward the enveloping ship above the planet. "They're boiling away the surface," Morrell gasped. "Those beams are destroying Durain." Helpless, enthralled, appalled, the command crew stared at the ghastly image on the screen. Beams of light, of destruction, lanced from the intruder, tearing into the surface of Durain. Wherever the beams touched, boiling columns writhed upward and were suctioned off toward the predator somehow by the incalculable energies involved. Durain was being annihilated while they watched, unable to do a thing to save their world or their people. Chapter 9. At the mine site in Formax, the blasts of energy burned the ground, searing through hundreds of feet of soil to the rich mineral deposits below. Several hundred miners were incinerated in the deadly beams of light, the few grams of metal in their vaporized bodies being added to the metals being siphoned off into space. The ground cracked, shook, and collapsed under the barrage of energy. The old tunnels collapsed, and more people died in the devastation. The mine supervisor barely had the chance to scream before she, too, burned away. She had been standing 3 miles from the impact point, but the bare shadow she left on the desiccated soil vanished as the earth trembled and imploded in the wake of the attack. Similar scenes of devastation occurred all across the surface of Durain 4 as the planet died. Warren was beyond panic now. His mind had almost overloaded on mental and emotional pain. His world was being murdered around him, and there was nothing he could do about it. The various monitor screens showed devastation after disaster all over the peaceful planet he had governed only this morning. The high-intensity energy beams were tearing the world apart as they sought out metals, minerals, and anything else the invaders wanted. Warren wasn't even bothering to try and cope with the death tolls, because thousands were added every minute. Some died in the barrage, others when the superheated atmosphere burned them down. Others died in the earthquakes caused by the beams. So few had been able to escape this incredible devastation. Whatever space-worthy craft there had been on Durain had been filled to capacity and sent off into space. The invaders would probably massacre the survivors as they fled, but perhaps some would stand a chance of escape, and hopefully, somehow, extract revenge for this genocide. "We have to get out of here," one of his aides screamed, barely audible over the terrifying roaring outside. The air that had boiled away into space had created a vacuum. Hurricane-level winds whirled across the planet as nature tried to fill that void. The winds were ripping apart what few buildings and structures the earthquakes and energy rays hadn't managed to destroy. "And go where?" Warren yelled back. "There's nowhere left to escape to, and no ships left to flee in." The aide was beyond thinking logically, however. He simply bolted for the closest door, running for his life. For a second, Warren considered following him. But what was the point? Out there or in here, he would still die. It didn't matter any longer. There was the familiar hum of a transporter beam, and for a brief second hope flared within the minister. Somehow they were being rescued. Maybe it was the Federation at last, or... His heart fell as he realized that the targets of the transporters were not the survivors. In a shimmer of light, blocks of computers, equipment, and anything still intact were vanishing. The invaders weren't content to destroy the inhabitants of Durain 4. They were even robbing the corpses as they died. "No!" Warren screamed, shaking a futile fist at the sky. It was pure white now, as energy bolts arched from horizon to horizon, dismantling everything in their path. The ground shook beneath his feet, sending him reeling against one of the now blank walls. In a shower of exploding glass and mortar, that collapsed. Warren's dead body was briefly buried under half a ton of brick and steel, before the energy arcs played across it, vaporizing everything. "Heart of the Prophets," breathed Morel. His mind refused to function as he saw the destruction of his home world. "This is genocide!" Sections of the crust of Durain were breaking apart as he watched. The inner magma of the planet surged free, spurting up in great geysers of boiling rock. Nothing could survive that. He finally broke his gaze from the screen and stared into the shocked faces of his bridge crew. They were even more affected than he was, he realized. Every one of them had lost families, friends, and neighbors in the Holocaust. As Durain seethed, cracked, and bubbled, every one and everything they knew must surely have perished. Morel tried to concentrate. The intruder was still sucking the last dregs of whatever it wished. The energy fires were still blazing, but there was no atmosphere left to conduct the great discharges any longer. Incandescent blasts continued to rip through the heart of Durain. "Enough," he announced. It was impossible to help his world any longer, but perhaps it was not too late to extract some measure of vengeance. Turning to his first officer, he ordered, "Set course for the closest of those portals you discovered on the intruder. Maximum speed." Turning to his engineering officer, he added, "I want all warp drives to be overrun. Throw the damn dampers away, and I want the containment fields down-powered." None of them had to ask him what he meant, and thankfully not one of them questioned his orders. As they moved to obey, he saw only the desire for revenge in their otherwise bleak eyes. Morel collapsed into his seat, drained of everything save the desire for revenge. Perhaps his phasers could do no damage to the alien craft. Well, they'd see what a starship with its warp core breached might do when it crashed into the intruder. Satisfaction filled Dron's being as he watched the projection of the target planet that hovered over the conference table. As anticipated, the energy beams were boiling away the much-needed metals and chemicals of the dying world. The comp was scrolling facts and figures faster than anyone could possibly read, as the tally was taken of the resources obtained. The transporter rooms were taking all the intact machinery they could find for future salvage, and the botanical receptors had rescued billions of units of plants and edibles. The processing of this world was going well. Dron glanced up as he realized one of the messengers was standing beside him. "What is it?" he asked, annoyed at being disturbed in this moment of triumph. "Can you not see that I am busy?" "My apologies, Grand Master," the female answered, bowing her head obsequiously. "There is a female at the chamber door who insists she must speak with Hive Master Torque with great urgency." "Send the fool away," snapped Raldar, looking up from the projection. "You know we are not to be disturbed whilst in session." "Wait," Dron ordered, as the messenger started to turn. This female, would her name be Sana? The messenger bowed again.
Indeed.
Dran smiled slightly. Then by all means you had better pass on her message to Hive Master Torque, he told her, and tell the Hive Master that he has excused his duties for the moment to speak with her. The messenger bowed again and hurried away. Dran smiled once again, this time at Raldar. She has no doubt come to tell Torque that she has been assigned to Team 2, he explained. Torque will then need to save her. Dran tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the edge of his shell. He will have to come to ask for a favor from me. I have been watching him as this recovery operation has been taking place. He did not look happy. I have a strong suspicion that he will attempt to block our next procurement. If he is in our debt, however, this will prevent him from an outcry. Raldar inclined his head. A wise plan, he murmured. I know, Dran agreed. He turned his attention back to the holographic projection. Now, to business. I see that the operation is 30% accomplished in so short a time. I think we shall have to publicly commend Boran and his team for their magnificent work. The rape of Durain continued. We're approaching Durain 4 now, Dax called from her console. We can drop out of warp in 2 minutes. Understood, Sisko answered. He had been monitoring all the information he could from Bajor. All transmissions from Durain had died out more than 20 minutes earlier. None of what had come through, though, was good. It sounded as though the invader was annihilating everything and everyone in its way. Sisko slapped his comm badge. Sisko to O'Brien. Chief, tell me something I want to hear. O'Brien's voice floated back. Sisko could hear the strain in it. Well, the good news is that shields are up to 80%, Captain. The bad news is that it'll be at least 2 more hours before Fontana and I can get the weapons systems back online. The circuit boards here were really riddled. All right, Chief, Sisko said, trying not to sound too disappointed or worried. I know you're doing your best. Can you return to the bridge? I know I'm going to need you here. Sisko out. He stared at the screen thoughtfully, weighing his options. With the shields almost back up to strength, at least they had some protection against whatever the aliens were using as weaponry. But without firepower, they weren't going to be able to sway the course of the battle much. Which left diplomacy, if that had a chance of working. If he couldn't make the aliens listen, then there would be little option but to run for cover, tail between his legs. And he hated that option. It would look as if he were abandoning his responsibilities, and the situation was appalling enough without that. Dax glanced around from the navigation console. Approaching Durain, she reported. Even she looked tense. Full impulse, Sisko ordered, focusing all his thoughts on what was about to happen. Dax's hands flew across the panel, and there was the subtle shift in engine thrumming that signaled change. Full impulse, she reported. Switching main screen. All eyes on the bridge were drawn to the screen as it sprang to life. There was a collective gasp of horror at what they all witnessed. Durain was virtually invisible, with the intruder vessel draped about it. Bolts of celestial lightning ravaged the smoking, blackened core of the murdered planet. About 30% of its mass was gone, either to the ship or boiled off into space. Sisko managed to swallow and called out, "Life signs." Julian, looking pale and shaken, managed to turn back to his station. His fingers shook as he fought to gather readings. "On the planet, none," he answered, his voice haunted. "I can't get any readings from the intruder." "I'm picking up several hundred ships," Kira called from her post. With weaponry offline, she was staffing the science station with Julian. "Most of them are fleeing the planet. Hard to say how many survivors made it, but there can't be a whole lot." "There's still some fighting going on," Odo added. I'm reading 8 alien vessels, unfamiliar configuration, and 3 Bajoran craft. On screen, Sisko ordered. Almost anything had to be better than watching the destruction of Durain. The picture shimmered and was replaced by one of 4 of the aliens' dart-like craft speeding toward 2 of the defenders. As Sisko watched, he heard the turbolift door hiss open. "Bloody hell!" That was O'Brien's voice. The first 2 alien ships caught up with one of the Duranian ships. The lone vessel was pouring everything it could into phaser power, but the shields of the attackers held firm. As the bridge crew watched, the 2 aliens passed on either side of the Duranian ship, which seemed to simply disintegrate into dust as they passed. "Chief, what are they using?" Sisko demanded. O'Brien was already at the closest sensor port, striving to get readings. "Give me a minute, Captain," he said. 2 new weapons in 2 weeks. Sisko dragged his eyes away from the screen. "Dax," he said grimly, "try and raise the invaders' ship. I have to try and talk to them." "Got it," O'Brien said, with a trace of satisfaction in his voice. "I've been trying to figure out what they were doing since we got the first pictures of the battle from Bajor," he explained. "I had an idea, but my readings just confirmed it." "So, what is it?" growled Sisko impatiently. "Monofilament." "What?" O'Brien spread his hands, fingers extended. "Monofilament," he repeated. "Wire only a few microns thick, virtually invisible and undetectable, but aligned molecules. The result is an incredibly tiny thread that can cut through anything at all with virtually no resistance. These aliens have made a sort of web out of it, stretched between 2 of their ships. They just fly past their target, and the monofilament slices it apart." Kira scowled. "But why won't shields stop it?" "Because it's too thin," O'Brien explained. "It's probably out of the shield's sensor range. It's only a couple of atoms thick, and no shields I know of can stop a couple of atoms from getting through." "Can ours?" asked Odo. O'Brien snorted. "Not even at full strength, and we've only got 82% right now." "That's not very reassuring," Odo answered. "It's the best I can do," O'Brien informed him. "But I have reconfigured the sensors to detect the nets." Kira looked thoughtful. "Now we know why the enemy attack only in pairs. They need 2 anchors for the monofilament to keep it tense." "Right," O'Brien agreed. "It's fantastic technology. There have been experiments with the stuff before, but nobody's been able to stabilize monofilaments that thin. They generally just break apart." He shook his head admiringly. "I'd love to take a peek at how they do it. They're marvelous engineers." "And bloody killers," Kira growled. "Look what they've done to Durain." "Oh, they're killers, all right," O'Brien agreed. "I was admiring their technology, not their actions. It's a damned shame to pervert science like that." Dax glanced up from her panel. "I've managed to patch through to that ship," she announced. "The person in charge is a Hive Master Dron, and he's reluctantly agreed to speak with you, Captain." "Has he?" asked Sisko softly. He felt a burning rage in the pit of his stomach at what these intruders had done. "Then put him on the main screen. I think we all want to see him." The picture of Durain being ripped to ruins faded, to be replaced by that of Hive Master Dron. Sisko's right eyebrow rose slightly as he studied the alien. It was impossible to judge his size just from the picture, but he looked vaguely humanoid. Actually, Sisko realized, what he most resembled was an armadillo. The most obvious thing about Dron and the other aliens he could glimpse behind the Hive Master was that they all had segmented shells covering their backs and skulls. They were all varying shades of gray and brown, and none wore clothing of any kind. Their arms were long, with 4 thin fingers. Their necks were thick, their heads long. They had snouts, with 2 slit nostrils in the front, and large, expressive eyes. Small tufts of spiky hair protruded in clumps all across their non-shelled skin. "What is it?" asked the Hive Master, clearly annoyed. "I am Captain Benjamin Sisko of the USS Defiant," Sisko replied, trying to keep his anger under control. The alien peered at him and then wrinkled his nose. "Another alien species," he complained. "How many of you are there in this system?" That wasn't quite the response Sisko had expected or hoped for, but he wasn't about to get sidetracked. "Hivemaster," he said firmly, "call off your ships." "They are not attacking," Dron snapped. "They are defending. The criminally insane inhabitants of this world attacked us." "That's not what I heard," Sisko replied coldly. "Nor is it what I see. You have destroyed Durain and killed almost 500,000 people." Dron's snout almost rippled with muscular spasms. "That is not what occurred. You have been misinformed." It was more than Sisko could bear. "Your ship is sucking the shreds out of Durain's dead husk," he cried. "You're trying to tell me that you didn't do it?" "That is not what I claim," Dron replied. "We have absorbed the planet, yes. It is necessary for our survival. But the fighting was begun by the inhabitants of this world. Captain Sisko, we offered them safe passage away, and even aid in leaving. They refused our offer and attacked us." He spread his arms wide in a very human gesture. "We had no choice but to retaliate." Sisko wasn't going to argue semantics while there were still people dying. "Call off your ships," he repeated. "Allow us to aid the survivors." Dron's snout twitched again. "I would be more than happy to comply," he agreed, "but only if you will guarantee that the attack on our hive will cease. If you do so, we would be glad to help you collect survivors." "I don't think we'll need your aid," Sisko answered, only just managing to contain his fury. "But I will make certain that you are not attacked." Dron inclined his head. "Then I shall have my defenders withdraw, Captain." He turned to give an order to one of his fellows. "It is done," he reported. "You may collect your peoples." Sisko nodded and made a chopping motion with his hand. Dax cut the link, and the picture of Dron vanished, to be replaced again by the smoking wreckage of Durain. "Start scanning for survivors," Sisko ordered the command crew. "See how many need assistance." He stared at Bashir. "Doctor, I suspect a great number of them will need considerable medical help." "My teams will do what they can here," Bashir replied, "and I'll organize DS-9 to prepare for refugees." "Can you believe that creep?" Kira snarled as she started the scans Sisko had ordered. "Claiming that Durain started this?" "I believe that Dron really thinks that," Odo answered her, "or at least wishes us to believe that he really thinks that." Kira glowered at Sisko. "Are we just going to allow them to get away with what they've done?" she demanded. "No," Sisko replied softly. "I promise you, they will be held accountable for every death they've caused. But this is not the time to start a fight. We still don't have weapons capabilities, and even if we did, I doubt we could fight a vessel like that." "So we just do nothing?" Kira cried. "No." Sisko gave her a very firm stare. "We help the survivors. Then we think about retaliation. Do you understand me, Major?" It took a great deal of willpower, but Kira finally managed a very tense, curt nod. "Yes, Captain." "Good." Sisko deliberately turned away from her. He hated having to confront Major Kira, especially when a large part of his own mind was crying out in the same pain as hers. But the living came first. The dead could wait. "Captain," Odo looked up from his panel, "I'm reading signs of a dangerous engine overload from the Morven Falls. Its engines are going critical." Bashir paled. "They must have had a malfunction." "No malfunction," Odo contradicted him. "The crew has done this deliberately. They are moving in toward the intruder on a collision course." "A suicide run," Sisko exclaimed. "They're on a suicide run." He stared at the image of the hive on the screen. What would happen if they succeeded? Chapter 10. Tork hurried out of the meeting room, relieved to be leaving the scenes of death and destruction he had witnessed. His conscience ached terribly with the strain of what he had seen. Had it been necessary? He still couldn't answer that, but he strove to bury his doubts as he went to meet with Sana. Today had been her determination, that much he knew, but why had she come to take him from such an important meeting? And why had Dran allowed it? Then Tork saw Sana standing nervously, her fingers running up and down the edge of her shell. It was obvious to him that she was in serious emotional pain. There was a tick below her left eye. "What is it?" he asked, concerned and protective. "What is wrong?" "I just spoke with Harl," she answered, the tick more pronounced. "He told me that we have attacked an alien world and killed its inhabitants. Is this true?" Tork's snout twitched in concern and anguish. "Yes," he conceded. "It is indeed true." She looked at him in anger, shock, and betrayal. "How could you allow this?" she cried. "You, of whom I thought so highly. How?" It didn't help Tork's emotional state that he had been pondering much the same question. "They attacked us first," he explained. "Their ships began the fight. We only retaliated after that." "And their planet?" Sana gestured behind her wildly. "I am no fool, Tork. Processing has begun. Servos have started their operations. Phase 2 is beginning. That can only mean that the hive has processed the alien planet." "Yes," he agreed again, reluctant to meet her accusing stare. "Their world is processed. We have almost everything from it that we needed." "And its inhabitants?" The fury of the question was like a knife between his plates. "Most are dead. The survivors are being allowed to leave unmolested." "How generous!" Sana cried. "What happened? Did even Hive Master Dran's bloodlust get sated?" "They were all insane," Tork answered, trying to quell his own doubts also. "They were dangerous. They refused to leave their world peacefully. Sana, they lived on the dirt of a planet and would not go. We could not reason with them." "Is that any reason to slaughter them?" she asked with a cold fury. "No," he admitted. "No, it is not. But I could think of nothing to do that would save them, or stop Dran. I did not know that this would happen, nor did many of the other hive masters. Dran told only those he could trust, I am certain. The rest of us were caught with our shells open, unprepared. I am sorry, Sana. I need time to think this through. I want to do what is right, but I am becoming more and more uncertain what that is." The anger in Sana's eyes faded slightly. "I knew that you would never support such evil deeds," she told him, stroking the edge of his shell. "And I am sorry if I was too harsh on you." "No," Tork replied. "You are not as harsh on me as I am with myself. This is a terrible situation, and I must find some way to honorably resolve it. I promise you that I shall do something, although at this moment I do not know what it is." "You are a good person, Tork," Sana said, the affection in her voice unmistakable. "And I only wish that I could support you in all the ways that you need." "You always have," he said gratefully, "and I am certain that you always will." This reminded him of his earlier thoughts. "Today was your determination," he exclaimed. "I had almost forgotten. Today you have become an adult." "Yes," Sana agreed, and there was no mistaking even further pain in her voice. "And it is the most wretched day of my life." Fear stabbed at his stomach. "What do you mean?" "My determination was that I should become an astronomer. which you desired. Indeed. But I am to be on Team 2. Torque was devastated by this news. There had always been this possibility, of course, but he had always refused to face it. He and Sana were meant for one another. The determination would have to reflect that and place them both together. And now, this on top of everything else. Torque didn't have to say a word. Sana knew what was going through his mind, because it had to be going through her own as well. She gripped his hands. "I know that it is terrible," she said, as gently as possible, "but it is the determination. It has been decided." "Yes." Torque spoke dully. He felt as if the shell had been ripped from him, leaving him naked and utterly defenseless. "Harl believes that you will try to get the determination changed," she added. "But I know that you are too honorable to abuse your powers in such a way." "Then I wish I were not so honorable," Torque cried. "To avoid losing you, I would almost go so far as to request a reassignment." Sana stroked his shell gently. "But only almost." "Yes." Torque sighed. "It would be wrong of me to question the determination. It would seem that we are destined to be apart, always." He shook his head in bewilderment. "If there were only something I could do." "You can be brave," Sana informed him. "I am as shattered by this as you, my love, but we must both be strong. We have to face our destinies and do the best we can for the hive. If it must be apart, then no matter how difficult it is, we must bear it." Torque sighed again. "I have much to bear," he told her, "and saddened as I am by this news, there are more urgent calls on my attention. There must be something that I can do to mitigate the next phase of the great design." Sana managed a wan smile. "If anyone can, it will be you. I have great faith in you, and great love for you. Remember that, always." She turned and left the chamber swiftly. "As if I could ever forget it," he murmured to himself. With a heavy shell, he turned and walked back to face his own destiny. Never before had he felt so alone or so bleak. Waiting for him inside the conference room was Hosir. Torque didn't want to talk with anyone, not even Hosir, at this moment, but he could hardly avoid it without being extremely rude. "Bad news?" guessed the elder. He wrinkled his snout in sympathy. "Has your woman jilted you?" "Not exactly," Torque answered. "She has been assigned to Team 2. "Ah." Hosir nodded, and then scratched at himself below one of his plates. "And you, of course, are Team 1. Well, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do about it?" demanded Torque angrily. "The determination has been made, and it is a basic of our life that the determination is never wrong." Hosir snuffled. "Yes, I suppose it is. Still, even if the determination is infallible, it isn't omniscient. Think about that." He gave Torque a friendly pat on the shell, and then wandered off. What did he mean by that? Torque had no idea whether Hosir was making a point, or whether he was simply getting senile. Still, as depressing as the news about Sana was, the most important thing to do right now was to try and figure out a way of alleviating the terrible pain that the next phase of the great design would cause to the inhabitants of this area of space, if there was any way. End of Side 2.